Today is Wednesday, October 18th, and this is the Hendrick Hudson Board of Education meeting. Can I have a motion to open the meeting?
Motion.
Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the board will be going into executive session for the purpose of collective negotiations under the Taylor Law, medical, financial credit, or employment history of a particular person or corporation, or matters leading to the appointment or employment history of a particular person or corporation, or matters leading to the appointment or employment or promotion or demotion or discipline or suspension or removal of a particular person or corporation. Can I have a motion to move into exec?
Motion to move into exec.
Second.
Second, all in favor? Okay, the board will be back at approximately 7 evening. Today is Wednesday, October 18th, and this is the Hendrick Hudson Board of Education meeting. The board has just returned from executive session. Maybe first stand for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we get started, can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Moving on to the consent agenda. Does anybody have anything to remove this evening from the consent agenda? Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second? Second. All in favor? We're really cruising on. Okay, the next part is the oath of office for our new school superintendent. Carmen's gonna come up. Mike, you can come over this way, I think, so that the camera captures you, and I'll step aside. Is that all right, Greg?
I, Michael Trombley, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New York, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of superintendent of the Hendrick Hudson Central School District according to the best of my ability, effective October 21st, 2023 through June 30th, 2024.
All right, we're very excited for Mr. Trombley to be joining us. His official start date is Saturday, October 21st. I do believe, depending, I guess, on the weather, that he may be around on campus with his family. And then Monday morning, he will be in the district office. So we're very excited to have him. Great. Now we're going to be moving on to our work session this evening. Dr. Peg Oliveira is here. Margaret, do you want to give an introduction?
Good evening, everyone. We are very privileged this evening to have with us Dr. Peg Oliveira, who is the director of the Giselle's Child Study Institute at Yale University. She has been with us all day in different forums with different folks present, parents, teachers, administrators, talking to us about her depth of knowledge around child development and all good things that come with our youngest learners. So I will turn this over to Dr. Oliveira.
Thank you so much.
Let's get you a rundown.
Great. Oh, no, I have.
No. Sorry, there we go. Now we hear you.
Nice. Thank you so much. Yes, as Margaret said, I have had the privilege of spending the entire day here, meeting with parents, meeting with educators, meeting with administrators. And I greatly appreciate you entrusting them to me. We had some really interesting conversations. I learned a lot about what's on their minds, what is important to them. And hopefully that can inform a little bit of our conversation tonight. With that, I do have a PowerPoint, and I am like very accustomed to like being up and moving about when I do that. So you may see me leap out of my chair at any moment.
No worries.
But I'd love to, just give you a little bit of background on me, a little bit of background on Giselle, because it frames how we think about this work, how we do this work, and the content that I'm going to share tonight. I'm by training a developmental psychologist. I have a PhD in developmental and social psych. And my area of concentration, both in training as well as in my career, has been early childhood. So, so right off the bat, that tells you a little bit about where my thinking is and what I'm gonna share with you guys tonight. I started my work in graduate school in preschools, in classrooms, then worked in advocacy for over a decade, mostly in Connecticut on state legislative work related to ensuring all children have access to high quality early care and education, moving Connecticut forward on ensuring that teachers are adequately compensated, as well as doing some work with what we have in Connecticut is called the Office of Early Childhood. It's like SDE, but for just the little guys. And working with them on identifying core knowledge and competencies for teachers. So what it is that teachers need to know and be able to do in order to best serve children based on what the research tells us children need. That's a little bit related to our conversation tonight. Thinking sort of backing into, right, action by starting at the point of the child. And I think that's a really essential sort of obvious, but necessary thing to say out loud, is that sometimes when we're making, as the adults, really hard choices about kids, we sometimes forget that it's about the kids, right? That the center of all of this work is children, our children, and more specifically, like it was so great to see a child here tonight for the first kid I've seen all day. That's like a long time for me to go. Like refreshed me again, right? They refreshed me. There's not just children, but there's a child, right? There is a family thinking about their child, and that's a really big responsibility for individuals like you all, like me, who are in the position to give advice, to make decisions, to impact the trajectory of young lives, and in that, the trajectory of your entire community. And so I don't take that lightly, and I am very grateful when I get to do work like this on the ground. And you know, I hope that you know, I've reminded us all of that responsibility. The work I do at Gazelle has been a nonprofit, had been a nonprofit for about 75 years on Yale's campus in New Haven. It was founded by Dr. Arnold Gazelle. He was also the founder of the Yale Child Study Center. On his retirement from Yale, he started this nonprofit up the road. And for 75 years, we sort of both sat there, you know, Yale being enormous Yale and Gazelle being this tiny little Gazelle, but very complementary work. I became the executive director of Gazelle in 2016, and shortly after began conversations with Yale about Gazelle entering the Yale Child Study Center. And it was in 2019, just before the pandemic, unfortunately, that we became a part of the Yale Child Study Center. And so we've been there since 2019. Because of the pandemic, it feels like 5 minutes, but it really has been quite a few years now. The benefit of that for us and for the individuals and districts and schools that I work with is that I have this amazing access to extraordinary research, extraordinary individuals, colleagues who are doing really good cutting edge work on what children need to thrive. So that has been you know, a tremendous support to me doing the work that I do. And to Gazelle doing the work that it does. I always say I have the coolest gig on the planet. I get to take really amazing research and translate it into you know, layman's terms and bring it to individuals who are on the ground actually impacting children's lives, making change. That's parents, that's educators, that's administrators, anyone who engages with young people. And that's part of what I was asked to do tonight, was to bring some research or the knowledge base that we have currently on what young children need in order to succeed both academically as well as to have good lives later, right? And I hope that what I can offer informs your work but also I may not have known exactly the questions you have in your head, right? Like I guessed at them. And so to the best of my ability and, within the context of what I was asked to come and share, I'm very interested in your questions. And so let's make sure to leave some time just for you guys to lead the show, not just this be, me talking at you. So ask questions, stop me if you're like, wait, I need to make sure we, don't go till midnight and have 30 minutes to ask you some questions. And we can redirect this as necessary. All right. Related to this work and related to Gazelle, we do our work guided by this mission to promote the principles of child development. Let's stop there for a second. That's really important, especially to our conversation tonight. I don't have subjective opinions on any of the hard things that you all are debating. What I'm here to offer is the principles of child development, what research tells us is best for children in all circumstances, and then for you to use that information how you need to. We do our work inspired by two concepts. One, innovation. Dr. Gazelle was an innovator. He really took what was not a science and turned it into the science of child development. Prior to him, investigating children and child development was very subjective, and he made it more objective, more of a science. His father was a photographer, and so he started to utilize tools like photographs and film to document how kids grow, right? And I know this for sure because when I arrived in our amazing, beautiful old building, there's this gorgeous piece of furniture that has tiny little drawers, and inside of them are films, right? Tiny little slides of babies doing baby-like things, right? And it's his documented library of how babies change and grow over time. And this is sort of a no-brainer to us, even those of you who have not studied child development, that kids go through sort of predictable stages of development. We're going to talk about that tonight. But at the time, that was sort of like, wow, innovative. Certainly objectively documenting, codifying child development and stages of child development was very new. And so from Dr. Gazelle came folks you might have heard of like Piaget and Erikson, who have their own stages of development. So we try to stay in that spirit of innovation. For us, what that means now is ensuring that our work is guided by the latest research and that we are staying on track with what we know is best for kids. And then objective wonder. This is like one of my favorite phrases. And at first you might think those two words don't really go together. What does that even mean? I think you're making that up. I kind of did, actually. The word objective, right, first of all, comes back to the science of child development, right? How can we best utilize whatever tools are at our disposal to, as adults in a child's life, be objective in viewing that child so that, and this is the big sort of goal, right? So that we can allow children to show us who they are, right? Without our own biases getting in the way. And when I use the word bias, all I mean by that is we all have a story, right? No one comes to the role of parent without first having been the child. No one comes to the role of teacher without first having been a student. And so in that, we have stories, right? I heard them this morning. We ended the first session and I heard, when I went to school, we did X, Y, and Z, and then that classic phrase, and I turned out just fine, right? So we all have those, this happened to me, and I turned out just fine. Thank goodness, right? And thank goodness, we have ways that we can turn out just fine. And we're going to talk about how that happens for people. But it just is true that we come to the adult child dyad with a story. And those stories color how we see what children do, who they are. And so it's not about erasing that. It's certainly not about, turning all the adults in the world into robotic carers and children that, use an algorithm to decide what kids need. What I'm implying is that we do our work to know our story. So that when we engage with children, when we make tough decisions about children, we at least can see how our own stories are impacting our choices. And that may mean that we still allow that to happen, but at least be conscious of the process, right? So we use a lot of tools to try to allow the child to truly show themselves to us, right? And then the word wonder. I asked a lot of your educators this morning why they came to this work. What was it that drove them to be, in a quite frankly, somewhat thankless profession that is inadequately compensated, but has extraordinary, motivational outcomes for it. And I asked them to really actively remember that moment, when you knew I want to be an educator, I want to be a teacher. And they assured me that none of it was based on their desire to meet a whole bunch of standards that a whole bunch of people who know nothing about children set for them, right? That's not what drives people to be educators. And but unfortunately, it ends up being what takes up a lot of conscious space in educators' minds every day. And so I asked them to have a practice of reminding themselves why they got into this work. And because that's what brings education to life, right? Again, it's all about remembering that at the core, there's a child. So wonder, it's about reminding ourselves that children are interesting, that their behaviors can be inconvenient, but can we be curious about them? Can we allow children's behaviors to function as messages to us about what they need and who they are and what they're trying to tell us, because they don't have words for it always. And I'm not just talking about our 5-year-olds. I have a 15-year-old, and even they, don't always have words for what their needs are, what they're feeling, right? But man, do their behaviors speak loudly. The hard work, however, is on us, right, to become literate in the language of child behavior. And that's what I try to help parents and children do, and try to get better at myself every single day, is when children speak to us through their behaviors, what are they trying to tell us? What needs are they trying to show us? But we can only do that from a clean space if we stay objective about it, and if we stay in a space of awe of child development, of wonder, of curiosity, right? Otherwise, sometimes these inconvenient behaviors, it's tempting to think about them as things that need to be extinguished or fixed. And that's not actually helpful to children. And it's short term, right? We know that, when you find a short term extinction of a behavior, it comes back in some other way, right? And so what we really want to do is get a source of behaviors, better understand what kids are trying to communicate to us through their behaviors, and then we can do the good work that they need for us. So that's what guides our work at Gazelle, and really does frame the conversation tonight. We do all our work in what's called the neurorelational approach. What does that mean? We take good research, like good old Dr. Gazelle there with his baby, and then we couple that with new research, whatever is up and coming and hot off the presses and is framing and supporting our understanding of child development today. At this time, there are 3 big bodies of research that we look to guide our work. The first is the attachment literature. That is old and new all at the same time, right? We've always known that, and if you're an educator, you've heard this phrase a bazillion times, relationships matter. It's the relationship, stupid, right? Yes, absolutely. That's still 100% true. And then some. What we now understand is that relationships are not just the context within which children grow. It's not just their environment, but relationships can actually impact brain development. It can change the architecture of the brain. The neurological connections that happen in a brain can be impacted by children having or lacking safe, secure, strong relationships, right? And that's with other adults, that's with other children, that's with their parents, that's with their families, that's with their teachers. Just having adults and other humans who care about them, who they feel are taking care of them, changes brains, right? And we'll talk about how that change happens in a very basic way shortly. Which brings us to the next piece, neuroscience. What do we know about the brain now that we didn't know even 20, 25 years ago? We now know that the brain is changing and growing faster in the early years than we ever understood before, right? We can no longer assume that we can wait till 5 when kids go to kindergarten, then we'll deal with them, right? 5 is really, really late. It's like basically like a senior citizen of brain development, right? Like the brain has evolved so far by the time a child is 5 years old, you've missed a good portion of its growing life. Now that said, for those of us who are not 5 anymore, the brain is plastic. We know that too. More plastic, more malleable than we ever understood before. And so you can teach an old dog new tricks. The brain is changing all the time. There's always hope for healing, right? Even for those of us who are, in our actual senior citizen years, the brain is very plastic. And so we never give up. We certainly never give up on a kid. That healing can happen in the brain at all times. So it happens faster and it happens earlier than we ever understood before. The last piece, super, super new, and I always preface by saying, and I know very little about this, but I do want to put it on the table, is epigenetics. We now understand that genes are not this on-off switch that we used to be taught, those of us who went to middle school back in the 80s. We now know that gene expression can be modified by our experiences and environments, right? And so even genes, like we used to think about the nature-nurture argument. Well, is it nature or is it nurture? Is it genes or is it your experiences? The answer is yes, it's all and then some again, right? It's not just it's Halloween, so let's talk about it. It's not just like M&Ms and Reese's Pieces in a bowl that kind of mix. It's nature, it's nurture, it's all those things. It's much more of a chemical process than that. It's that experience can actually change your gene expression. It can change the architecture of your brain. So it's not just a mixing, it's an actual reacting to, right? And so we need to take all of these pieces of information now very seriously when we think about how we build schools, how we build curriculum, how we create what we call ideal learning environments. What are the elements of an environment for a child that optimize their potential for learning, right? And growth and development and being a good human in the world. Any thoughts, questions, or anything I can offer at that point?
Yeah, you're doing great.
Oh, good. Good. All right, from there. I want to share that this is my understanding of where you are in the making hard decisions process, as I call it, right? I think that there is two sort of phases to making a hard decision. And they are the divergence phase and then the convergence phase, right? And I want to suggest that maybe we all are at somewhere in the divergence phase, right? And what I mean by divergence is that a lot of things, it can be a little bit of controlled chaos. A lot of things are happening, and we don't actually have to agree just yet, right? And that's really important because if we already have a decision and we already have an opinion and we already have, a pressure to agree, it's very hard to be open to new ideas, right? And so what we know about making hard decisions suggests that stay in the looser divergence phase first, but then when it's time and get to convergence, right? In the divergence phase, and this is why I'm here, I think you gather information, you get smart, right? I used to have a mentor that would say, go do some research, make me smart about this, right? And so I think that's what you said to me, right? You're like, make us smart about this. And so I'm going to try to do that, give you some information. I think it's important also to reflect on the present, but focus on the future, right? You all have been handed an extraordinary responsibility for not just the children that are in your schools today, but for the children of the next decade. Children that are not even born yet, right, will benefit from the decisions that you make in your tenure. That's really important to remember. It's also important to remember because I met amazing, dedicated parents today. I am a parent. I'm not going to say amazing, dedicated, but I think maybe I'm pretty good. My kid's all right. I'm a parent, and so, you know, talking about being objective and bias and all that, you know, depending on what day, I think sometimes my kid's awesome, sometimes we've got some work to do. Right? But what I know is that no matter what the day is, I'm gonna fight for what I think is best for my kid. And I'm not going to apologize about that, right? And so that is the role of a parent, to unapologetically advocate for what's best for their kid. And that's what I see parents in this community doing, and in an amazing, compassionate and smart and thoughtful way, right? So how great is that? You know, I spend a lot of time in a lot of different districts, and you don't always get that. Sometimes, you know, I show up to parent meetings in the morning and no one else is there, right? So congratulations for the work you've already put in to ensuring that family engagement is an essential component of your community. I think it's working. And it's their job to be passionate advocates for their children. And then you have a job to think about their children and the children to come after, right? And that's a little different. So all those voices are really essential, right? Then you have to think about all the pros and cons of all the options, right? Consider all your options and think about the pros and cons of them. But this is a good time to like put everything on the table. Have, you know, a creative fest about like, how could we do this? And don't be constrained by it's never been done before, because everything's never been done before at some point, right? And then somebody does it and you succeed, or you fail a little and succeed later, whatever. But considering all of your options, I think in the divergence phase is really important so that you don't close off to potential really good new ideas. But it's also really essential that we be very upfront with ourselves about what the pros and cons are of all the decisions we make. Because here's, as an adult, we have to acknowledge, like I think we've learned by now, every decision has some pros and they all have cons. You know, I did get a couple of different times through my day today, what would you do? What do you think is best? And I can genuinely tell you, there's no magic bullet. If there was, like, we'd be doing it all over the country, right? There's no one answer, because communities are all different. And so you need to figure out what's right for your community. But also there's no one right answer for any one community. They all have some benefits and some hardships. And I think what's really important is that as we make these kinds of big decisions for children, we are very clear that any decision we make is going to have some pitfalls. Things are going to go wrong, because if we don't, then when they do, we get really scared really fast, right? Why? Because at the core is a child, and we don't have time to not get it right, right? So it feels very emergency room-like, right? I think in the engagements I've had with important people making important decisions about kids, and you should feel an urgency, right? That said, if you are clear visioned about what the cons are of the choices, two things happen. One, when they happen, you're not surprised, right? You're not shocked that this didn't go perfectly the first time, right? You can sort of bounce back, regroup, right? And second, maybe if we have the time and the resources, you plan for the likelihood that this has a 60% chance of happening, right? And we wish it didn't, but it probably will. And how are we going to be prepared for that? And so if you can acknowledge what the cons are of any choice you make, then you can prepare for them, you can put resources in place, you can support your teachers in those cons, you can support your families in those cons. And again, I don't see many big decisions about children that don't have some cons, like most things do. And so it's not even an option to say, well, there just won't be any, right? Well, we'll just succeed the first time. Like kids are really wild cards, you know, anything involved with kids is like, there's gonna be some cons, you know, they're tricky and they surprise us all the time. So I think that's a good part of a decision-making process, especially around kids. And then again, like we said, what are the implications for the future, both for the children involved, for the community, for the budget, all those things, right? And then once you do all of that good hard work, then yes, convergence, right? Then we have to come together. Because again, at the end of the day, there's a child, right? And these are important, urgent decisions to be made. All right, so with that, in this gathering information phase, I want to share sort of work us through like some fundamentals of child development that I hope we can all sort of like work from, right? Kids grow along the same path, but at their own unique pace. Well, what do I mean by that? Okay, well, all children develop through sequential and predictable stages of development. Can we agree? Sound okay? Yeah. Good example. At what age, any parents? Nice. At what age do children learn to walk? One-ish. I like that. I like the ish.
Yeah.
One-ish. Do you know the CDC just came out with new milestones? And at what age they say in the milestones? It's 18 months. Wait, let me explain. That doesn't mean ish. No, it's not an ish. That's the interesting thing. So it's always been 12 months, right? Like if you ask your parents, how old was I? They're gonna say something like 12 months-ish, right? But I can tell you that this is what happens. On your child's first birthday and they're not walking, guess whose phone starts ringing? No, mine. And they call me, but probably your pediatrician. Please call your pediatrician. My phone rings and they're like, oh, my child is 12 years and 1 day. Why aren't they walking yet? Right? And so parents were getting a little bit worked up about this 12-month mark. When 12 months was the ish, was the like, and some do it sooner and some do it later. So the CDC no longer uses the ish mark, right? They say, well, if they're not walking by 18 months, definitely call your pediatrician, not pet, call your pediatrician, right? So now that's the like outside margin. That's the like, it's time to pay attention. Pros and cons to that. We have fewer parents freaking out, but we may start to miss some kids. Those of you who do some screening work, right? So I'm kind of like, that's nice, but oh, there could be new pros and cons. So now we have to do a whole bunch of work reminding educators and parents and pediatricians and all that like what, but if you don't see them walking by, I don't know, 16, 17 months, at least pay attention, at least ask some questions, right? Maybe get their hearing checked, their vision checked. There's lots of things that actually impact the child's ability to get up and walk, right? Okay, so they all kind of come through these sequential and predictable stages of development, but they do it at their own unique individual rate, right? Some will walk at, we know kids who walk at 9 months, yeah, 10 months. I heard somebody say even younger today. We know kids who don't walk till 15 months. I have a 15-year-old I shared, when you look at your like teenagers or the kids who walk into this building every day, you look at them and be like, oh yeah, that one was an early walker. Look at that walk. That is a solid, learned walk, right? No, it's all a wash, right? We get all worked up about it. And we get worked up about a lot of things when we're parents of very young children, but we get all worked up about it and then it just doesn't matter. In scientific language, what we say, it is not a predictor of anything, right? So sooner is not necessarily better, later is not lesser, right? Kids do it at their own pace. the Nike sneakers that people can buy their young children today, is that helping them walk sooner? Right, no matter how good Nike gets at making shoes, kids are still like, 1 year sounds good to me, that's when I'm gonna walk, right? Give me whatever shoes you want, 1 year is good. So no matter what we've done, kids pretty much walk at 1. Okay, so good. So they do it at their own kind of unique individual rates. Sooner is not necessarily better. Okay, how about this one? Children's developmental age, or what we call developmental stage, can differ from their chronological age. Let's unpack that a second. So wait, my kid has 2 ages? I had hard enough time remembering 1. Well, chronological age is how many years since they entered the earth, right? Since they were born. That's the birthday we celebrate, right? Great. So let's say a child's chronological age is 9. Good. Developmental age is more, where are they on the developmental trajectory? So a 9-year-old can look developmentally 9.5 in some skills and developmentally 8.5 in others. And that 6-month difference is honestly just boring to me, right? Like, it's not interesting. That's just a statistical, confidence interval, that space within which everything's good, right? Why? Because you said it's 9-ish, right? It's 1-ish, give or take 6 months in any direction. Kids can vary, right? And we still think that's normative child development. So chronological age does not necessarily mean developmental age. When we know a child's developmental age in different domains, like their cognitive developmental age, their fine motor development, their gross motor developmental age, that is magical data that as educators and as parents, we can then utilize to best inform very specific instruction for a child, right? Where we can do the just right kind of experiences for kids that allow them, that allow us to meet them where they are and allow us to then hold their hand, scaffold, we call it, to the next stage, right? Rather than this cookie cutter approach to assuming 9-year-olds are 9-year-olds and they all know the exact same thing, right? So knowing developmental age is really important. Getting good at reading developmental age in children, that's something we teach people to do, is a really big skill to have. And then lastly, really important to our conversation tonight, development is impacted by both internal hereditary factors and external environmental influences. And this is really where I want to pay a little attention, right? This external environment and influences. So yes, there's normative child development. Kids sort of grow. If we kind of get out of the way, normatively developing kids kind of grow. And then there's a portion of them that need additional supports. And that's why it's good to know milestones. If a child isn't walking by 17 months, heck yes, please get in there and offer some supports, right? But then there's environment, and all kids grow in differing environments. Even 2 siblings, who told me they had twins? Yeah, even twins, right? Will grow up in.
We have twin
No.
people here.
Don't drink the water. Wow, that's wild. Yeah, so you tell me, are they like
And twins in the audience.
you just this has got to be like something's up here. That's crazy. So you tell me, are they the exact like little clones of one another, but they've had the same house, the same parents, the same upbringing, the same? No, right? Because they start actually, they say they have the same genes. But gene expression, it can change, blah, blah. And they may not have the exact same genes, right? So there are lots of external or environmental influences that can impact how a child develops over time. And temperament is there for sure, but then the experiences you have, the people that are, in your life, and whether you feel safe or not safe, whether you feel held and loved or not, whether your needs are being met or not. And those are very black and white kinds of examples, but you can imagine, the spectrum of ways in which children's environments can absolutely impact their development. You all are in a position to, push some levers that change the environmental influences on children's lives over this next decade. That's sort of the frame I want to offer and why it's essential that you're doing what you're doing. And I commend you on it, getting smart about how to make these decisions about what's best for kids, because environment does matter. These decisions really do matter. The teachers know the phrase backwards planning, right? It's what we do as educators all the time, but that's kind of a new concept to the rest of the world. And so I share it because it's a really good thing that we should all sort of like adopt in our life. Like, I think if we backwards plan from, you know, I want to make sure to get my oil changed every 3,000 miles, is that the thing? And actually made a plan for how that would happen, it might actually happen on time, right? But instead we set up these goals, but then we don't think about, you know, how to get it done, right? So I suggest that maybe as you think about making hard decisions about children in all your capacities, right? And all the decisions that will come as in your tenure here, you think about what are the desired outcomes? What are we trying to achieve? What is it that we are attempting to get done, both in the process of growing young people into good humans in the world, as well as in like the kinds of environments and the kinds of schools and the kinds of communities that we want to build. And if you hold sort of your desired outcomes as your North Star, then it gives you some guidance in addition to all the information and data and all that stuff, some guidance about how to make some of these decisions, right? One of the desired outcomes is probably kids learn, yeah? And that has become sort of a hot topic since COVID, right? One of the big environmental influences that we have seen on our children, and there was lots of conversation about this morning. So confirming that yes, people, parents, educators all do feel COVID has had an impact, right? But what is that impact? Here's the answer. I don't know. If anyone says they do know, they're lying to you. We know some stuff. We know, you know, that for the last 3 years, our world has undergone a communal trauma and that is hard. We know what our 3-year-olds who were born in 2020 look like today, but here's what we don't know. We don't know what that 3-year-old is going to need when they're 8 or 15, right? We can guess because basic child development hasn't changed so much in the 75 years that Gazelle has been in existence, and lots of big things have happened in the world. Nike has made really good shoes. Kids still walk at 12 months, right? So there are probably some things that COVID, even COVID, let's say, even COVID can't fight kids. They're still going to do their kid thing, right? And then there are other things that we should stay in a space of objective wonder about. Objective meaning, let's watch, let's measure, let's take some data, and wonder. Let's be curious. Let's not assume. Let's not pretend we know, right? Let's allow children to show us who they are now, what they need, and if those needs are any different than the kids we saw in 2019. Probably, it would be silly, I think, to assume nothing is different. It would be equally unusual, in my opinion, to think everything is different, right? But what are the things that have been impacted? We don't know yet, you know, we're not going to know for a little while, right? And they may last or they may not. It compels us to be a bit more agile, which, by the way, I'm just gonna put on the table, schools not so good at that, right? It's a little hard for schools to be agile. And so we have to maybe think outside the box, maybe get a little bit out of our comfort zone around what we're going to do for this cohort of kids. And it may not even be the thing that we do forever. It just may be the thing we need to do now in order to come back to heal, right? We've heard a lot about this phrase learning loss. I do want to sort of diffuse that a little bit if I can, while not underestimating, like, so I just gave you the, like, we need to pay attention, we need to watch, let's see what happens. But if I can like point for a second. So this is what they call learning loss. There's the trajectory of typical learning. Kids start here, amazing teachers and awesome curriculum and phenomenal schools. And by the way, just kids grow and they learn more and learn more and learn more, and it goes up, 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 up. And the suggestion is, well, this is where kids were, right? And since COVID, we see them more here, right? In some variables, this is absolutely, we are seeing this is absolutely true. In particular, things that you only learn because you've been in school have seen a slower trajectory of growth, right? That kind of makes sense. If you weren't in your Algebra 2 class during your sophomore or junior year of high school because you were home with COVID, maybe you didn't quite learn Algebra 2. That doesn't necessarily mean children are developmentally delayed or having any more serious issues than simply their content was not offered to them in a way that they were able to take it, right? In particular, let's think about this phrase, learning loss. Now, loss suggests they had something and then it's gone. But that's not what this line says. It doesn't say that kids went up here and then all of a sudden, they became stupid and they dropped, right? It's not loss. It's not like they had something and then it went away. It's just development has taken a different trajectory, right? So I don't love this phrase learning loss. I don't think it's actually descriptive of what we're seeing. I also am not convinced on these lines. And here's why, because what we've seen of development, it doesn't look like this. Again, parents in the room, do your kids grow like this, or is it more something chaotic like this? Kids are swirling, right? This is what our research suggests kids do. They go forward and then they come back a little bit, and then they go forward and then they come back a little bit. And why is that? It's because we're human. Because we learn something and we get really excited about it. And you see this, like the typical, like, 4 is really great. 4s are so great. Where'd our 4-year-olds go? 4s are so amazing. They are massively confident. Like, if I get to be anyone when I grow up, I want to be 4.
Yeah.
Massively confident, right? They learn stuff and they're going in, I can run and I can climb up the slide and look at me. And then they fall or something happens, and then all of a sudden they're like, actually, I really want that stuffy that I liked to sleep with when I was 3 years old, right? And then my phone rings. Oh my God, my 4-year-old needs their blankie again. I'm like, stop calling me, and I hang up. Right? It's totally normal. Like, we get really good at something, we're really confident, and then we realize, oh, there's more to it, right? Oh, it's way more complicated than I ever imagined. And then we kind of take a step back, regroup. What did I learn here? What can I do? What do I really know? And what do I not know? And that's good. That's really important to the learning process. Because if you get stuck here at 4, like, we don't actually want to grow up to be 4-year-olds, because then you don't actually learn anymore, right? You just get stuck in the I'm confident I know. What we need to do is step back and say, well, I thought I knew, but now I realize it's more complicated than that. It goes, the complex becomes, the simple becomes the complex, becomes the simple again, becomes even more complex, right? And that's important to then shooting them forward and learning even more, to be able to be in that space of wonder, of curiosity about what don't I know? What more could there be to this? I couldn't possibly have mastered it all at 4, except 4 will be like, no, I totally did. But you get what I mean? And so there's a little bit of a coming backwards and then a going up and then a coming back. So maybe during COVID, we're seeing kids come back a little farther. Would that be insane? I think it's actually kind of rational, right? Like, if the world gets, maybe we can even think a little bit about ways in which we took some steps backwards, not backwards, but back to, right? If the world feels very chaotic, how amazingly evolved for a young brain to say, whoa, I need to find my way back to calm. I need to find my way back to when things made sense, right? And so maybe there's a little bit of a return that's even bigger than before, right? And maybe that's going to take some extra effort, certainly on the parts of educators who have very hard jobs dealing with the reality, of, we thought you'd be here and now you're here, right? Maybe that's happening, but it's okay because by meeting children where they are, if we meet them down here where they are instead of where we thought they were going to be, we can get them back up here, right? But it requires us to be a little more patient, requires us to be a little more in that space of wonder. It allows us to get out of the way of what we expected our 8-year-old to be doing at this point in the school year, and honor where they truly are at this point in the school year, so we can give them those just right experiences and then move them forward, right? That's how we have hope of getting everyone back on track. Thoughts or questions on that? It's a theory. Good. All right, so now you get to tell me some stuff. How about that? How would you finish this sentence? Kids can't learn if
They don't feel safe.
they don't feel safe.
They don't feel welcome.
They don't feel welcome. So good. Anything else?
They don't belong.
They don't belong. They don't feel belong.
I was nothing scared.
Yeah, kids can't learn if they're scared. So good.
I would say kids can't learn if they don't know their routine.
Wow.
Or if you don't want them to fail.
Oh my gosh. So good, right?
Stress.
If they're stressed, yes. Yeah, kids can't learn if they don't make mistakes. Yes, right? You guys are good. I'm glad this is being recorded. Shining. Yeah, so good. Yeah, you nailed it, right? I sort of gathered all the research, and here's what I see. Well, it seems like in order to learn, kids need to feel 4 things. And we use these 4 as the pillars of when we coach in classrooms to help teachers create ideal learning environments, right? The first is they need to feel safe. Ding, 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 you got that, awesome. And lots of the other things that were said go into that category. They need to feel connected. Ding, 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 you got that, belonging, a part of the family, a part of the classroom community. They need to feel capable and in control. Actually, that goes right to the routines piece, right? Who said routines? And we talked about this with the educators this morning. You know, the more you have consistency and routine in your classrooms, the more kids feel like they can go about the work of learning without being sort of told what to do all the time, right? But if they're guessing at what's going to be next, if it's different every day, if they're not sure what's happening, they like control. Surprise, surprise. And so they're going to try to take it. They're going to try to find a way to feel more in control. That's just human. We all do that. And 2, they're going to feel uncomfortable. They're going to feel not safe. They're going to feel uncertain about what's happening. And we're going to talk about brains a little bit, and you'll see that that's potentially one of the worst things we can do for children whose brains are already, like you said, stressed, right? Children whose brains are stressed are working really hard to feel safe and connected and all of these things. And if we add inconsistency and instability to that, it just wreaks havoc, right? So routines, things that allow kids to feel capable and in control. And finally, they need to feel like they count, like they matter, like we see them. Like this day would be really different if you hadn't been here with us today. Because guess what? It would have. Like even this meeting, right? Every individual here changes the dynamic of the conversation, right? And so showing up matters. Being a part of the community matters. We need to remind them that they count. With educators, we work on all these 4. There are different levers that different people in different positions of power have. You guys really have the safe and connected in your hands, right? I think there are ways in which we can design learning environments that help or hurt this capacity for children to feel safe and connected, right? And I want to frame this work in that way, that if we can think back to, well, does this help or hurt the concept that you told me, right? That kids need to feel safe, that kids need to feel connected. Why do we know that these two things matter? Well, here's the deal. Here's what we know about them. Kids can't learn if they do not feel safe. What do I mean by that? We just said clear and consistent expectations, routines, and rituals. Well, what happens when we don't have those? Kids feel neglected. It feels a little bit like anarchy, right? Chaos. There's no consistency. There's no meaning. There's no sort of dance, right, to the day. It starts to feel like they're being sort of led through their lives instead of making choices about their lives. The connected piece. We need to prioritize engagement, and that's engagement of all sorts to all people, right? So it's not just the teacher to the child, but it's children to children, it's teachers to teachers. That's a really big one that we sometimes forget. That's really important connection work as well. Teachers to families, families to school administrators, families to families, all those things, and you can keep going and make 3,000 versions of this, right? But all the relationships related to your school family matter in the idea of creating connection. All right, so now let's think about, from a brain perspective, how do we know this is true? So this is my offering of just basic brain development stuff, enough for us to have a handle on it, related to the kinds of things we're thinking about, right? If you think of the brain as having 3 levels, bottom, middle, and top, right? And the brain actually grows from the bottom to the top or back to the front, right? This way, yeah? So this part of the brain, way back here, right? What do we call that? And even this, what's this? Yeah, the spine, right? Brain stem. That's actually kind of brain too, right? This part of the brain is actually in a normatively developed baby, pretty much intact when a baby is born, right? If a baby touches a hot pan, what does the baby do? Immediately, what do? They might scream. They pull away, right? Did they learn that? Did you have to teach baby? Like you might have to teach baby, don't touch hot pan, but if baby touches hot pan, there's no need to teach baby to react, right? Baby knows from the start, hot, no good, pull back, right? So there are certain behaviors, actions that are almost not brain, that are muscle, nerves, right? That just happen, and that's good. The entire brain is a survival organ. Its job is to keep us alive, right? And all day long, we do things that challenge that, right? We make weird choices and the brain is like, oh, here we go again. Got to keep this creature alive. What do we do now? Right? Pull the hand away from the hot pan. Okay, moving on, right? But that back part, that bottom part of the brain is really highly functioning even in a baby. It does things like heartbeat and breathing. We don't have to turn those things. There's not an app when you wake up in the morning. Okay, start the heartbeat, because that's what we did develop by now if there was the need to do that. But thankfully, that app exists internally. Our nervous system constantly all day regulates our breathing, our heartbeat, and a whole bunch of other things like touching a hot pan and reacting. It's stuff we don't think about, right? But it is brain, it's nervous system. Okay, so that's that part of the brain. We do call that the survival brain because at its core, most fundamentally, it is keeping us alive, right? It helps us to survive. The middle part of the brain is the emotional brain. That's the limbic system. The amygdala is there. That's like this tiny little nut-like almond-shaped, filter, 2 of them, that control like where information is going to be filtered to. Is this an emergency? Does it need to go to the bottom part of the brain? Is this not? And can we send it somewhere else, right? The middle part of the brain is also the hippocampus. That's memory. So if you've ever smelled the smell of chocolate chip cookies and you're like, oh, it brings me back to when grandma used to make chocolate chip cookies. That's why, right? Memories and emotions are really closely tied together and physically so in your neurological architecture, right? So this part of the brain is responsible for how am I feeling about my connections in the world? Do I feel here in the lower part? Do I feel safe, right? Are my basic needs being met? And here, do I feel loved? Are my almost as fundamental and basic needs being met, because that's what we know about humans and connection, is that we cannot survive without that. Actually, practically, objectively speaking, babies know that they need a whole bunch of support in order to survive, right? And so they get very agitated, right? Very worked up when they don't feel safe and loved, when they don't feel connected. They have a survival mechanism that says, hey, adults, pay attention. I'm gonna cry, I'm gonna be ornery, I'm gonna get your attention because I know that in order to survive, you need to attend to me, right? I need to be connected to you. And so that middle part of the brain is sort of that kind of survival, connection, relationships, attachment, right? And then there's the top part of the brain, that's called the prefrontal cortex. That's responsible for a whole host of skills that we call executive function skills. You've heard that phrase before? I bet a million times, right? Sitting at this table. These are skills that look like in practice, things like self-control, working memory, and cognitive flexibility. They're the ability to focus, to persist when things get hard, or like someone said, make mistakes and you don't give up, you keep trying. Communication skills, critical thinking skills, creativity, flexibility, taking on challenges. These are higher order thinking skills, right? The capacity to do this kind of work, however, requires a couple of things. Firstly, the brain grows from bottom to top. It also kind of functions that way. And so first we need to ensure that these basic needs are met, right? Like if you weren't breathing right now, how interested would you be in my PowerPoint? I'm not going to take it personally, right? My guess is that interest would wane, yeah? Right, when basic needs are not being met, the rest is fluff, it's not important, right? I've got bigger things on my mind. Those include, of course, breathing and your heart beating, but they also include, am I well fed? Am I warm? Am I housed, right? But then importantly, they also include these fundamental, am I safe, am I loved variables. Do I feel connected? Do I have important people in my life that I can count on? That is almost as fundamental to survival as a human, as the food and the water and the shelter, right? So if these things are not met, if those needs exist, then it's very hard to get the top part of the brain, the executive function skills, online. To be very clear, this is not a broken brain. I want to make that really crystal clear, right? The brain evolves to respond to the environment it is given efficiently. It's really good at it. And so if you are given an environment where these basic needs are not met, then the brain says, survival organ, I need to do what it takes to keep my creature alive. I'm going to focus heavily on ensuring that these needs get met. And I'm not going to expend a whole bunch of energy building this other part of the brain, right? I have to get this first. Make sense? So let's take an example. You're driving here tonight and a squirrel jumps out in front of your car. What do? You're thinking about it. This worries me deeply. Let's assume you all just answered very freely. You swerve, or you brake. Let's just pretend that just happened, right? So you're driving here, squirrel jumps out in front of your car, you swerve, you brake. Do you think about it? No. Which part of the brain activated? The bottom, middle, or top? The bottom, the survival brain. It's almost not even brain, it's just muscles doing things. It's like touch the hot pan, pull it away. It's reactive, yeah? Was that a good thing that that part of the brain kicked in? How would you feel if at that moment the prefrontal cortex said, now hold up. I'm really good at critical thinking and problem solving and cognitive flexibility. So don't you want some of my input right now? can we like talk this through? Get creative, come up with some new solutions to the same old squirrel conundrum, right? No, at that moment, what we want, react. The squirrel is gone if the prefrontal cortex gets involved, right? So at that point, we're like, no thanks, prefrontal cortex, I'm good, right? I'm good. So it's not that this part is better or this part is better. There's no better part of your brain. You really do want to keep it all really nice and growing and healthy, yeah? We want it all functioning, and we want it functioning in a balanced manner so that the essential parts that make sense to be utilized at any moment come online, right? It becomes efficient. Now, the brain responds to the environment it's given. So how about this? What if all day long, your life was squirrels jumping out in front of your car? Oh, it is. I don't resonate with that at all. So if it feels a little bit like all day long squirrels are jumping out in front of your car, which part of your brain is on alert? Is reactive? The bottom part of the brain, right? Efficiently. It's saying, this is my life. This is my world. I gotta be ready. There might be a squirrel around that corner. There's another squirrel over there. I'm good, I'm ready. And it's good at it. And you're swerving. You haven't hit a squirrel in at least 3 days, right? You're doing great, right? It is not a broken brain. It is a brain evolving to the environment it's given, right? We may have kids. We may know kids whose lives are full of squirrels, whose brains are very effectively evolving to the environment they're given. We are a community that has just undergone a communal trauma that probably looked a little squirrely for a few years, right? Our brains may have been impacted. Now that said, when you utilize the brain, it's like a muscle, right? The parts you use get stronger, the neural connections grow deeper, right? In those areas. And you get better at things. Like the more you go to the driving range and hit the golf ball, actually that doesn't happen, I'm still really bad at it. But ideally you slowly get better at the thing, right? Practice makes better, not perfect, right? So the things you use, you get stronger. The things you don't use, you kind of lose. It's called neural pruning, right? The brain gets weaker in those capacities. That's where we get into trouble. If all day long your life is squirrels jumping out in front of your car, this back part of your brain very efficiently says, I need to be the boss. I need to be in charge here. I need to grow big and strong, right? Literally grow big and strong. And then other parts of the brain sort of atrophy, get weaker. The neural connections are not made. And so when your amazing geometry teacher comes in and says, well, aren't you interested in learning this great math that I'm not sure how it's ever going to be utilized in your life, but I'm sure it will someday, right? You say, sounds good, except I'm on a bigger mission right now, right? I've got squirrels to deal with, you know? And so this is the amazing thing about schools, is that they have the capacity to take brains to the gym. But first, they have a job. And that is to put what we call the fire out in the back brain. If we are encountering students that do have a fire in the brain, very well-evolved brains to the environments they've been given, which is filled with squirrels, then what we need to do first is create safe and connected environments so that this part of the brain goes, here I'm loved. Here I'm safe. This is not an inconsequential job of schools. This is essential to then activating, taking the prefrontal cortex to the gym and doing these awesome communication and problem solving and critical thinking skills that we now understand predict lifelong success, not just academic success, lifelong success. We know that these are the kinds of skills that individuals, humans need in order to succeed in life, right? And And so we need to get to that. We need to do that. But first, we need to acknowledge that we need to do the work of creating safe and connected environments. And every lever we press, right, has some pros and some cons on that. How does this make kids feel safer? How does it make kids feel a little bit less sure? How do these choices make kids feel more connected? And how does this cause some disconnection? In all those choices, we weigh those options, but always coming back to the more safe and connected we can make kids feel, the more likely it is that we can do the hard work of growing these prefrontal cortex skills. Questions? Thoughts? Anything on that? How does stress play into this equation of growing brains? In a really big way, right? We talked about squirrels. Well, there can actually be positive squirrels, tolerable squirrels, and toxic squirrels. Let's move on from the squirrel. Positive stress, tolerable stress, and toxic stress, right? The level of complexity and challenge that an environment brings matters. Stress in and of itself is not a bad thing, though the word has been utilized almost solely as a negative. Here's what I mean. There is a kind of positive stress. I am under positive stress right now, right? Like I'm not totally chill and like about to take a nap, I'm like revved up and I'm a little nervous and I want to, be engaging and talk to you and get my point made. That's good because what it causes is a little bit of a heart rate increase, a mild elevation in stress hormone levels. Evolutionarily, that was a good thing, right? When there's, a danger, right? A little bit of stress is good. It wakes me up. My eyes get bigger. I pay attention, right? I have an energy surge. Once upon a time, most of our stress was actually a physical stress. Now that's not so much the case. Like a mild elevation in stress hormone levels doesn't really help me when I've dropped my iPhone into the bathtub, right? But that's really stressful. But that mild elevation, maybe it does, I scoop it out a little faster, right? But so the brain, again, a survival organ, and the nervous system is saying a little bit of stress is good. It makes you sort of alert in a moment where you need to be paying attention, alert, swerving, right, for those squirrels. And that's fine. Brief increases in heart rate, mild elevation in stress hormone levels, all good. There's even tolerable stress. We've all experienced some of this. Something very hard happens in our life. There's a temporary but serious stress response. If it is buffered by some resources, and in particular, supportive relationships, we can bounce back. We recover. We have the serious but temporary stress response. The body creates a whole host of stress hormones, but then supports come in. And in that process, the body responds with a whole host of different hormones that kind of wash the stress hormones away, and it's all good. This is most obvious when you think about a baby. Baby cries, signaling to us that it needs something. It's under stress, right? If the baby cries and the caretaker comes in, picks up the baby, hugs the baby, cradles the baby, figures out the baby, is hungry, feeds the baby, baby eventually stops crying, right? So stress hormones are elicited, the need is met, and a cleansing of different hormones come in and sort of wash away the stress hormones, the body equalizes again. Hormonal balance is achieved. If baby cries, but there's no response, it cries more, still no response. The need is not met. Baby stays hungry, baby stays wet, baby stays feeling unsafe or sad. Those stress hormones keep growing, right? And they never get washed away. That's when stress can be problematic, physically and emotionally, right? That's when we start to think of toxic stress, prolonged activation of the stress response system in the absence of resources, often in the form of protective relationships, that sort of rebalance our system. When we have ongoing stress that isn't relieved, that we don't see, hope for, that we're not getting the resources we need, that's when stress can become toxic. That's when stress becomes toxic in the body and in the brain. That's when we see this part of the brain overexcited, right? And this part less involved in life. It's important to understand that because we are seeing some of that, right? We are seeing that there are individuals in our community who have experienced toxic stress and whose brains have responded efficiently, these are not broken brains, efficiently to that toxic stress. And it becomes even more imperative that we sort of go overboard in creating these extra safe, extra connected environments in a time when a community is experiencing toxic stress. The young koala has a mental health problem, says the psychologist like me about the koala. Does the koala have a problem? Sometimes problems that we see as koala problems are really adult problems, right? The koala is actually responding quite koala-ish to the tree. The problem is someone has destroyed the tree. Point being, when we see brains activated in a traumatic manner to stress, to trauma, it's not necessarily that the brain has a problem. It's that the environment that the brain has been given suggests that the brain should evolve in this manner, right? And it's important to know if we can impact the environment, sometimes that solves all our problems. Right? Some of the complications that children, that families, that communities come upon are cracks in the road, right? Tiny little tremors. And with the appropriate set of resources, individuals can come through these tremors and be what we call resilient. And without those resources, the tremors can actually become what we call life quakes. The experience of the stress is basically a function less of the event and more of the person's response to the event. The same event can happen to two people, and we may react to it very differently depending on the resources we have. We've seen that through the last 3 years from COVID, right? Everyone underwent, the same experience of COVID being, universal pandemic. But we had really different experiences of that depending on what your job was, what your economic status was, what resources you had, what people you had to jump in and, support your kids through online learning, all those things, right? So it's not always the event, it's the resources we have to respond to the event. And that's important too, because a lot of times we have to make some hard choices for kids. And though we know that there are pitfalls, there are going to be some tremors, what can we put in place in order to ensure that those tremors don't become life quakes for families, right? What supports can we offer, knowing that there might be bumps in the road? It's also important to acknowledge that individuals with existing stress and trauma may respond to a new trauma in a very different manner. Like if you're the individual who does have squirrels jumping on in front of your car all day long, one more squirrel might just be too much, right? And so a nervous system, a brain, a heart on, already carrying some past trauma, and then the pandemic comes along and additional stress and bad news, a minor inconvenience can be enough to cause the tremor to turn into a life quake. If you don't have the resources in place to help them through that. What we can do is build resilience, right? We can think about ways in which we can counterbalance the stresses inevitable in some of the decisions and choices and things that children have to go through, right? what we know from the research are effective counterbalancing factors. Absolutely, first and foremost, supportive relationships. The more we can create connection, the better off children will be in being resilient to those tremors. The more we can build those executive function skills, things like focus and mental flexibility, self-regulatory capacities, the more their brains will be able to handle and heal from the existence of trauma in their lives. The more we can build mastery, self-efficacy, and perceived control, the more we feel like we can handle life tremors and we don't turn them into life quakes, right? And additionally, positive experiences, sources of faith, hope, and cultural traditions. These are, again, just coming back to ways in which we as humans have historically felt connected, felt a part of something bigger, right? Less alone. And so it's really important that we continue to offer those kinds of experiences. Those are what the research tells us build what we call the bounce, right? A child's ability, a human's ability to experience stress and even toxic stress, but build the brain and the nervous system and the skills and capacities to come back from that experience and continue on your trajectory of development. Additionally, I want to share that what we also know is that adults who strengthen their own resilience through healthy behaviors are better models of these behaviors for the children in their lives, right? And so the more we do our own work, the more we can help children do theirs. To summarize what we've talked about so far, I like this image because it captures two jobs that we as adults in children's lives have. One is to acknowledge that there is that superhero in every child, right? That we need to build the capacity of every child to actualize their potential, to be strong individuals in the world, and to get the work of childhood done, right? And so that's fantastic. But in order for them to do that work, we also have to build some safety, right? An umbrella, a protection from the storm. Right? Can we do both of these things instead of just one? Can we acknowledge that yes, children are strong, capable individuals with amazing capacities for resilience, but meanwhile, what can we do to make their path a little easier, to protect them in this process? And every choice we make as a parent, as an educator, as people who make choices about schools, weighing, does this create more stability, more connection, more protection for children to do the good hard work of growing and learning, or does it create less? And in that case, how can we build in supports in order to buttress that work? Again, I just want to remind us back that at the center of all of this is a child, right? Children, but a child too, some family's child. Maybe our family's child. And then around them are a whole bunch of systems, right? There's the family, there's the school, there's the district, there's the neighborhood, there's the community. And at all these different levels moving out, there's a differential impact on what your choices are going to have on the child. And the rings, beneath you, or getting closer to the child. But at the end of the day, there is a child. When we think about ideal learning, there are lots of inputs that we have to creating these ideal learning environments. Again, a lot of these have more of, or the lever is more powerful at the classroom level or at the family level, right? But you guys definitely have some control over some of the environmental factors that play into ideal learning. In that, I also want to remind us of another little piece of research on child development that we know, and that is that transitions are fraught with peril, right? Whenever there's change, that's an opportunity for something to go wrong. When you're just driving down the road, staying on one lane, there's only the car in front of you and the car behind you that you really have to worry about. But when you're swerving into the fast lane and then swerving back and then changing and then getting off and then getting up, every time you make a change, there's more of an opportunity for potential chaos, right? So transitions can be tough. Anyone who works with kids, anyone who's been a parent knows, like, if a child is on the playground and it's time to go home, they don't want to go home. If they're home and it's time to go to the playground, they don't want to go to the playground, right? If a teenager is awake and it's time to go to bed, they don't want to go to bed. If they're asleep and you want them to wake up, they don't want to wake up, right? It's very human. We are creatures of gravity, of habit. Like, what is happening should keep happening, and we don't really like change. Change requires a whole new energy, right? And so every change that we make, we need to just be very conscious of the fact that that is an opportunity for potential problems, right? And then to look forward and be conscious of what those problems might be, set some safety nets in place so that we are prepared for them. Anticipate those difficult periods, and when possible, reduce transitions for children. It will just make their lives easier. It will make your lives easier. Are we really that good at change? No. Someone mentioned this morning that schools today look a heck of a lot like the one-room schoolhouse of the past, right? Schools are not really built to change. But it's imperative that we get brave, right, and rethink what schools are. The brain research tells us that, the attachment literature tells us that. It's time that we recognize that the role of school is much more comprehensive than when we were in the one-room schoolhouse. And it compels us to rethink education. All right, so getting down to the actual business at hand. All I want to share with this, just to allow us to sort of transition into any questions you guys have, is just that I know that you've talked about and had in your district a community school model that's sort of based on geography. I know that you have transitioned into some version of the Princeton plan, right? There are pros and cons to all of those, right? I do not have a position on what's better or worse, so we can, erase those questions right away. I do not think there is a magic system that works for every child. I think as a community, you need to, as a community, you best understand your community and your culture and your kids' needs. And so you will come to the best decisions. But to acknowledge that they all have blessings and curses. It's just true. And the best thing we can do is acknowledge that what those are and plan for them. There's also a whole lot of hybrid versions of these plans, right? And I think you have begun to explore those as well. I know many districts that do a hybrid version of this. There are goals to the different kinds. And so I remind us back to, well, what are the outcomes you want, both for kids, both for your community, for how schools will work, right, in the next 10 years. So you also don't have to be sort of boxed into, well, it's either the this or the that. There are many different ways in which you can decide your community needs some remixed version. Considerations of those pros and cons. You've probably done many versions of this list, right? But let's just remember, one, transitions. Fewer transitions tend to be better for kids. But transitions are inevitable, right? Eventually kids have to learn how to manage transitions. And so what we can best do is support them through it, right? Costs, there are costs and different kinds of costs for different things in both of all versions of these hybrid models. A reason why the Princeton plan even came about was equity, and that is an essential outcome that should be considered and put on the table. Teacher collaboration, professional development, different models make that easier and make that harder, and that should be considered. And then parent and family engagement, how connected parents feel to schools, how much they engage with them, and how much you can allow for parent voice. differs in some of these different models, right? And so those are just some of the variables. And again, I bet you come up with a list of 10 times that number that you have to consider, but just to put those back on the table. And to remember that the divergence phase can be hard. But with the appropriate guardrails in place, and, you know, understanding that everyone making these decisions is coming from a place of passion, and that all everyone wants is what's best for kids. You can allow the divergence phase to be a little bit messy, to get wild, to have lots of options put on the table so that you don't feel constrained until it's time to make some hard decisions, right? That's my email. If anyone wants to reach out to me with additional questions or wants to talk more, I always encourage that. And with that, I just want to open up to thoughts, questions, and anything else I can offer to you all to support you.
Okay, I will. Okay, so you understand what we've gone through. I've been on the board. This is my my third year, and we're faced with this incredibly difficult decision. And I've worked through so many different motions of let's try to embrace this, let's push through, let's understand the 2-year grade banding, and then, oh, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. We've got all these costs that we didn't expect. So everything you're describing, I feel as though I've gone through, and I'm finally at a place where, not that I didn't always want what's best for kids, but I think that this group here, everyone sitting at the table, has really kind of hammered that out and brought us all together. However, the page where, in your presentation, where it says kids can't learn if they're not connected, I look at these engagement scenarios and I feel as though we've lost almost all of them. And when you're on this page, I'm not a crier, but I actually felt like I could just, you know, tear up and break down, because this is what I'm most worried about. And I think it's important that the board, and this is not, I guess, so much a question, but just more food for thought. Even any model that we move to, how are we going to ensure that all of this exists? Because from my perspective and my understanding and my role here as both a board member and parent, I really feel that we've diluted all of this by moving from a community-based setup to the 2-year grade banding. I was raised here, and I chose to raise my family here because I loved the feeling of community. I loved knowing that I was with my siblings. I loved knowing the principal of the school, and they knew me and my family throughout. The teacher to teacher. So we've been saying how the grade level, I get it. It's great for these teachers to be in the same place, but now there's no vertical integration. Student to student, this is probably one of the #1 things. We're forgetting that they're 5, 6, 7 years old. It's very difficult to network 150 peers, right? So when you move from kindergarten classroom 1 to first grade classroom 8, you could very well not know more than one child in the room. What does that do for these children? I'm just concerned because I love it. My son was in kindergarten at FGL when it was a community school, but he played a lot of sports. So he had friends from all of our various schools and even some outside of our district. Princeton Plan has allowed for him to be in school with all the boys that he loves to play sports with. So it's pretty cool. We see them at drop off, we see them at leaving, but they don't really see each other in school because you have 9 sections of 2nd grade, right? So I think my concern is that everything feels diluted. And I don't know if you have recommendations on how, no matter what model we're in, like, how do you form a relationship with your principal when it's a revolving door? They don't. I was there last year for 1 year. Principal didn't know me. They didn't know my family values. They didn't know my name. They didn't know my, you know what I mean? So I think it's very difficult to develop these real relationships that are important for the development of their brains.
Yep. Certainly certain models, certain versions of all of these models will make it easier or harder, but none of them are actually easy. Family engagement is hard no matter what model you choose, and so I just want to say that straight up. It's essential, it's important, and it has to be a part of building well-functioning schools, to have families engaged in their children's schools. But it can be harder with some models, and so everything you said was probably right. And I would encourage you to think about the last piece, which is, well, do you have any recommendations for whatever model we choose? How do we get this done? And I do, lots of them. But they're hard and they take effort, and they take time, and they take starting in the early years to engage with families, and plan forward for the trajectory that their children will have with the school, whether it's 2 years or 10, to engage them in the ways that families want to be engaged, right? Not everyone has the same goals that it sounds like you do. But that's okay too. Some families don't need that level of engagement. And so to understand what different families need, to be open to the possibility that family engagement looks differently for different families is really important. But then to acknowledge that, yeah, if you're only staying in the school for 2 years, that only gives you 2 years to create that relationship. And we all know relationships are hard, right? And so what can we do what supports can we put in place? How can we, ensure that some sort of relationship and stability is created for these children, even if they're only in the school 2 years. And that may be, there's lots of creative ways to do that. It may be that we think a little bit outside of the box about what the role of the principal in is it a 3-4 or 2-3 that you 2-3, and that they maybe have more interactions with the pre-K through first. So that the children know who that individual is before they arrive in the next school. As far as vertical alignment goes, we talked about that this morning with teachers. There are creative ways, some harder than others, in which the teacher at the first grade in this school can have more communication with the second grade teacher at the next school. But it's hard. It takes resources, it takes time, it takes intentionality. It takes a commitment to vertical alignment being a priority, right? If that's not one of your outcomes that you care about, then you don't do it, right? But if you decide that that's one, you either change the model or you say, well, this is the model we have, but we're going to put a whole bunch of time and resources into ensuring that vertical alignment can happen. I think you're thinking about it really well. The hard part is just at the end is that and then it's going to take time, and then it's going to take resources, and then it's going to take.
The same goes for when it was community schools. We could have put the time and effort into making sure that first grade.
They did.
Looked alike.
They did, they met monthly.
No, I know. I am not saying what they did or didn't do. I'm just saying that
Yeah.
the integration, whether it's this way or this way.
Yep.
Needs work.
Yes, and it all takes work in all the models. But again, being very clear about what that hard work is and which ones are going to make it harder or easier. And then building in the resources to do that work, rather than saying, well, we like that model, we recognize vertical alignment can't happen. Too bad. That's not a great answer, right? I don't think anyone's going to be satisfied with that. So, okay, well, we like this model for these other reasons. They provide us with these other outcomes that we like. They don't give us this outcome. Parent engagement is harder. So we're going to have to, a lot of times I don't see a lot of saving in one versus another of any of these versions. What I see is a shifting. So you're either going to place the resources here to account for the downsides of this model, or you're going to place the resources over here to account for the downsides of this model. If someone had a model that saved a whole bunch of money, I guarantee you'd know it, and it would be being done a whole lot.
This was supposed to be it. That's why we were here. So when I wasn't on the board leading into this conversation which got us here,
I don't know.
none of us were. There was a lot of conversation around money. It was really never around What's best for kids? How do we get equity? What's wrong with our current model? How can we make our current model better? What's the plan when we move into this two-year grade banding that's going to provide all of these benefits to children? We bring all these kids together. Okay, that's wonderful. What are we doing? What are we doing intentionally to make it, to build a community? So we came from having a community to having a very different community. It looks different. What did we do intentionally to bring that community together? You know, we as a board last year asked for a lot of data, information, metrics on parent engagement, attendance, behavioral, all that we
Test
never,
scores.
test scores. We never really got it, and we don't, and COVID made this also very difficult, right? Because we made a huge transition for our entire community in the middle of a global pandemic. So, you know, we didn't even really get to have FaceTime as a community to discuss it. It was all done, I mean, they were virtual when they voted on it. So like, there's a lot of people that think this is great now. There's a lot of people that think it's not. But we have really not sat and figured out what are values of this district, and how are we gonna make sure that, like you said, the COVID, where they go back and then they go forward, how are we addressing that? Because, you know, we're hearing that our second graders are coming from first grade and they're not really prepared. They're behind emotionally, socially. They don't have that, you know, when they're walking into a building, they don't have that safety. It's kind of like when you go from middle school to high school and you walk into ninth grade, those kids are like, oh my goodness. Well, now we have kids feeling like that consistently. So how do we fix that? Like in whatever model we're in, how do we fix that? And Hendrick Hudson hasn't been necessarily really good at transitions. And I'm not talking about elementary school because we were there for 6 years. 5th grade to 6th grade has always been hard. Parents complain over and over and over. And there's not a lot of change. Then we have this 8th to 9th grade, and the same thing over and over. We're not good at addressing, because I don't know if we know our priorities. So it has to be with intention. And I think that's the part that we need to do things with intention, and then follow through with what that is. That's what I learned, and what my thought process is after hearing this.
Can I say something to Piggy, that this slide that you had? Can you bring up that little red man?
The trauma guy.
The trauma guy? So this is really what I see. This is my second year on the board from when this happened. It's not just COVID. This community also lost Indian Point, which really hurt some people in taxes. For COVID, for some, meant that you stayed home and worked. COVID for others in this community meant that they weren't getting a paycheck. So the loss of Indian Point and an increased taxes increased their stress level even more. When they were feeling that, we put the Princeton plan on top of that. So the last little guy who everyone thinks they're overreacting because they're just talking about their experience, there's no empathy for that guy. And then I see your tremors. When I see these tremors, I see community breaks. So whatever model we do, and I don't know what model it is, I want to heal the community break that happened here. Because that's what we really all should be doing. We should be taking what we want, what we think, and what would be best to heal this community.
I think that's very well said. One of the things I just wanted to say was, I agree with everything Stephanie just said. She's on point with everything that she just spoke about. But one of the things that Mr. Sykes, when he was here, that he talked about is just, you know, equity in schools, and also us as a board coming together and understanding where kids are learning, how they're learning, and what they're learning. And I think as a board, we have to prioritize those things in order to figure out where we're going next. The Princeton plan is 2 years in. This is the second year, right? We had a lot of issues that busing, there was a multitude of things for the rollout. I understand that. But there's a lot of things that have been addressed and fixed since then, right? And I just think for us personally, we need to focus on the big picture of the district and what we're offering kids. And yes, we should look at all these different models and we should understand it and we should look at it just with clear eyes, how much it's gonna cost, but we're a year in. We don't even have a starting point of what this has done before we're talking about moving to the next thing, if we decide to move to the next thing, right? So I feel like we need to take the time, the energy to make the adjustments that we need to make, but also work on the bigger picture things. How are these kids learning and what are they learning, right? Let's start with that. And we can go to a lot of different places. But if we are just just focused constantly on just the buildings, the big picture is missed. The truth of the matter is the Princeton plan unearthed a lot of things about inequities in this community and what was going on. And we have to face that as a community and say, what are we going to do better for this generation of kids that are in the school and the next? It's like you said, this is future planning. I understand that you grew up here and schools were one way then, but the world has changed. It's changing every day. And we have to adjust with those changes. We have to make the school something that's future planning for all children, not just what
I understand.
know.
You're talking about equity, though. It's not equity when you put certain, groups of children, and I don't know who they are, but there are children who are extremely stressed and don't feel safe. So how is this equitable? It might be, I don't have the answer. And yes,
But why don't they feel safe?
because
So that-
I don't
so I-
think we've ever talked about the supports.
We don't.
Correct.
In either model,
Yes.
like, I think we've missed this, and that's something we need to
Well-
focus on, because there are pros and cons to either. So the cons, we need to make sure, whichever model we go to, that we understand them and we put the right supports in place.
yes,
Before we go. And
That goes
keep
back to
and
what
keep
she said.
measuring them and keep talking about them and keep looking at them and making sure that they're addressing what needs to be addressed. Like, I don't think we did that
No.
in the model before or the model today. Sorry.
No,
I don't know if
finish,
this
finish, finish. I was.
Yeah, but I think because you ladies were here when people got up to the podium. So from both sides, because frankly, my eyes were opened for some inequities that I did not know existed in this community. Okay? And then my eyes were open for other people who we listened to, but then I feel like people closed off their hearing when it wasn't what they wanted to hear. And it's this openness and this empathy that you had a different experience and I might still be hurting and this might be wonderful for you. What can we do to heal as a community? So it has only been 2 years and we've solved, I don't think we've completely solved the busing problem, but I can tell you what we have not solved. You have not solved the break in this community. You just have not. And it gets wider and wider. And I really think it comes to the point where no one wants to empathize or say, you know what? Your experience is valid. You had a good experience. You did not have a good experience. And what can we do to come together with that? Instead of just like, oh, well, okay, that was your experience, but now everyone loves this. I mean, I think we're just really not listening with with open ears and an open heart when it doesn't go with my own mind, with my fixed mindset on how I think things should be.
But I have a question. One of the things you guys have been asking for is data. So my question is, some of this data that they were asking for, what's the best way to measure this data? So when we're asking for these test scores, what are we supposed to be doing with that information? Because what are we looking for? Knowing that we have this spiral back sometimes before we move forward, knowing that we have this trauma on us, attendance, not just a number on attendance, what's happening behind that story of the attendance. I don't think that like numbers, you can manipulate them to do anything you want. When you're talking percentages or stats, you can manipulate them for either side of the story if you don't know the reasoning behind all of it. So I know that we're asking for this, but how are we measuring it and what are we doing with this and how are we taking all of that into account to make this decision?
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, I had that question back to you all earlier today. That's where the like, what are the outcomes you want? And how do you backwards plan from that? So what data you collect should be dependent upon what you care about. And that should be guided somewhat at least by what we know is good for kids. So you named some. Well, we want to see attendance for sure. We want to see some measurement of academic growth. I don't know what test scores or whatever you grade, whatever you want to use, right? But so, we won't go there. There's lots of things, and you could come up with a pot of 50 different kinds of data points to collect, but they should be defined by what you care about and what you think matters. It sounded like you maybe had a consultant that was going to do some of this work for you. So that's a really interesting idea, I think. I think working with them on what you care about and what the data points are and how you would gather that information is a really fruitful approach. I think that then you said a really important thing, but sometimes you can decide that the data says whatever you want it to say, right? And so you have to agree early on what that data is and what outcome you think means we're on the right path, and what outcome you think means we need a change in advance of seeing the data. Because once you see it, you're going to decide it supports your position, right? We're just as a human, right? So you decide you also need to decide realistically how long it takes to change a data point, right? You said 2 years. It sounds more like we've been in this a year and a change.
Yeah, but we don't have a baseline. So the last normal year of school, my daughter's in the 10th grade, the last normal year of school was when she was in 5th grade. That's 5 years ago.
Mhm.
We don't have a baseline.
Yeah, so those are decisions you all need to make. Do you use that baseline to compare from? Do you decide today is baseline? And see if things are improving? Because the likelihood that anything you did in the last year had, a significant impact on some of the variables that you really care about. I mean, it might, but a year is not a long time to, get the busing right? So, that's just decision points you guys need to make is but I would encourage you to make them in advance of seeing what the data says. Because data can be turned subjective very quickly.
And then that brings me to another question. We're supposed to be voting on this December 6th. Today, thank you. Today is October 18th. We're meeting 2-3 more times before this vote,
Mhm.
and we're getting the data sometime next month. Is that enough time for us to, because I get it, you said that divergence needs to be messy and a lot is happening. We're still, I think, at the beginning of gathering this information. We don't even know what we want. Is it realistic for us to say that we can have a decision made by December
I mean, you can
6th?
certainly have a decision made. Again, I'm not in a
A
position.
thorough,
So I think
position.
the answer to that is one, we've been gathering forever.
But what have we been
I
gathering?
understand, but as a board. We've
Oh my God, our
been-
whole
we have
last year,
spent-
my life was.
I know,
this.
countless, 24/7.
I get, but
making-
what do we have?
Okay,
I don't
but
have
listen,
any
if
information
you
yet.
don't have the necessary information, your vote on December 6th would be to stay status quo. Right? That's all you can do. If you don't have as a trustee what you need to make a decision,
But
then
as a board, we
not
should all
confident.
have the same information, and I don't have. We have never been given or talked about this information yet.
Do you know what we need? Because numbers are subjective, and I'm just gonna say it. This community has never been asked. They did this huge big change during COVID. During Indian Point closing. And they switched to this, and not once have we ever surveyed the community and said, which model would you like? I wanna know. I don't even know what it is.
But that's gonna also be based on emotion of.
There's-
of
No, no, no,
adults
no, if the community
Are we
came to
talking
you
about
and said to you,
Our
I
children.
want Princeton plan 75%.
No. There's legal ramifications there. So it is our job as the board. to
I'm
make
not
that
saying
decision.
that you make
But
it a
so the
yes, no
community says,
question.
We want community schools, and then the board goes, "Ee, but we like how this is going. Are you gonna go
You
against
say,
what they say?
giving, people know how to create surveys. You don't just straight out ask it. You say, if we switch to community schools, you'd get A, B, C, and D. It might increase your taxes, or it might not increase. Everything would stay the same. Would you prefer that? If we kept the Princeton plan, we found out this data point, this data point, this data point. Would you prefer that? I mean, nobody wants to ask it. We all know we're making the decision. But when I make a decision and I say, oh, the community voted for me and I gotta do what the community wants, it can't just be the people that pushed for me. It has to be the whole community.
But how would we get from the whole community? Because we
You
don't have
know,
a good history
when
here
I
on getting
promoted the Right to
information.
Read film in the community, I'm the one who went out with the posters and put them up at ShopRite and at the post office and every place I could find to hang that poster. I promoted it on the Google Groups group, because we couldn't do it as the school district. So you know what you do? You put your feet to the pavement and you hit the senior centers and you hit the gym and you hit the post office and you hit ShopRite and you put up a QR code. You put the QR code up. I put every laundromat, I went and put it in. You can do it. But
How do we prove their Hen HUD residents and all that?
it's,
And-
well, how did we do it in the past? You did it in the past. You did a thought exchange, you did a survey. We're still gonna survey the community. How did you prove it in the past?
I guess my question is, why as a board, can't we focus on what we're doing for these kids? Instead of, this knee-jerk reaction to do something else. There's a board member, Amelia's saying, I don't have enough information, it's October. I'm saying the same thing. I don't have enough information to make an informed decision that I'm making the right choice for anyone, regardless of what it is, regardless of how I feel about it, for December 6th, right? This package, I just got when I sat down here and I had to read it as I'm sitting here. So
Because it's your first year on the board. You
I
weren't here
understand, I
last year.
understand that, but I also followed everything on the board when I was
You
not
weren't
sitting here.
privy to everything that was
I
behind the
understand,
scenes.
I understand that. I'm gonna say all of those are correct. All of the above are correct. But we are sitting here now, right? And if we're saying we don't have the
So then you can't
information, we don't even have a starting point as to what our goal is for each child in this district. But we're making a decision a year and a couple of months in, when the busing was a big issue, right? Oh, we don't have monitors on the bus. Guess what we did? We solved the bus issue because now we're not getting as much emails about the busing anymore, right? So I'm just saying, with time.
There is something that
Can I
you
just-
can go through.
Can I just say, with time and with us being deliberate about what our goals are and what the end results are for each child in this district, then we can make a better decision. But we can't just make decisions based on, it's a year in and let's vote.
Well, we
Wait,
decided to vote
wait a
back.
minute.
We-
There
I know,
is
but I-
stuff that you guys can look at.
Well,
There's
that's the
hundreds of
thing. Can I
emails.
just-
I'm sure you saved them all. I have a huge folder.
I understand,
There's
but
all those survey results. You've been on the board long enough to know that there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes. I get what you're saying, but I am telling you right now, this community was looking last year for us to make a decision and do something. And you put pause on it because of what you two are saying right now. And I am telling you that if you do that to this community again this year, it will break.
But can we
It
just
will break.
address the two, like that you just said, then we don't vote, like that we can't vote.
No, then I'm saying, then you would vote status quo. Yeah, like you can't vote to change something if
But-
you don't feel that you have the information to do that.
And but if, my issue is you're saying you guys have information. I'm saying as a board, we should all have that information.
So you weren't on the board, Erica, you.
So
poll
can
all
you
of it.
just say,
And
so instead of saying that we just don't have it because we weren't on it, yes, we are the newest members on
But
the
you guys,
board.
you guys could be asking for
We
anything
have
that you
been,
need.
I've asked,
What have you asked me for?
I've asked,
Okay,
I have asked.
I'm sorry.
What did you?
okay, we're going around and around.
Erica and I worked very hard, and if anybody ever needs anything, you can always ask for us. Nobody has asked us for anything. We just got this tonight too.
I'm not talking about this.
Zenitha's working really hard on other data information that we need. Everyone's gonna be given what we can as we can.
No one has
I
ever
never-
said that
What's
there's
the
been
data
other
point?
information though.
But
I
it's
asked.
from before you guys were
When
on
we've
board.
spoken, I've said to different
Honestly,
members.
I just thought in the back of my head, I saved every email that ever came and put it in a Princeton plan folder. And
Which
I'm
would be
sure
great.
Carmen has the survey results, right? I know that there's the first Princeton plan survey that I had before I got on the board, the results that I boiled. I have that on my computer. I have information that I boiled, that I did my own research before I was on the board, but I didn't even think about that folder I have with the hundreds of emails that you can, I don't know how I would share. I guess I would download all those emails into a zip file and then it's not.
Why don't we
go
go
back
just
down
people's,
there?
like, every email that we've ever gotten from.
I have every email in a Princeton plan folder. And I'm sure Carmen, when we we took those surveys and we took that data in, we have that file.
From when?
I have the
Oh, yeah.
October 2020 survey that the district did. And I'm sure somehow they managed to tie residents to living here with that survey.
Guys, we can go back and forth on what information you guys have. We can also say we were elected, we both ran being for the Princeton plan and we won, right? So we could say that too. What I'm saying is, as a board, we need to have an objective. What is our objective for the children of this district? We don't even have that objective clear, right? So how are we gonna start with a baseline to assess anything that's given to us?
I think that we did a lot of work with coming up with objectives on last year, what was clear. So I'm just gonna throw this out. I remember coming on to the board, and I hope you don't take this offensively, and I do not mean it in an offensive manner, but I promised myself, I'm gonna say what I think this year, okay? Last year, when I came on the board, everyone voted for me because I was pro-neighborhood schools. And then after listening to everyone and really listening, I was like, oh my God, I didn't realize that there were all these different experiences. And then I kind of changed. It took a year. It did. My focus was more not on, I'm for community schools. I am still for community neighbor schools, but I don't know if that's what's best for this community. It took me a year to go from that point to let me do what's best for the community. And I'm gonna say you both are, I was voted in for Princeton plan, and I'm gonna keep Princeton plan. And I think that you were where we were a year ago.
But that's also not true. I've never stated that.
You just said you were both for Princeton plan.
I said, she.
Okay.
I did not say that. I have said that I am for what's best for the community. I even said while I was running, I like the Princeton plan, I like the grade banding, but I'm open to learning about all the options. That's what I want. I
We just
want
got
to,
them today, yeah.
well, no, not the other ones, but and I said I was open. I have always said
Okay,
I'm
so
open
then I
to learning.
apologize, but I'm just saying it took a year. I'm being really honest with you. It took me a year to really be like, to hear everybody.
We are not
really-
dug in, we're just saying, we need the information, it's October, and we got this today, right? We got the options with everything on it today, there's some options still missing today, it's the middle of October, there's Thanksgiving, there's everything else, but we're required to make a decision by December 6th. I just feel like we're putting everything backwards. We need to just think about the monitors and how there was such outrage about the busing and everything that was going on. We heard those people, right? We put monitors on the bus. That's why.
We're barely using
Yeah,
monitors.
They're not on the, they're not even on the.
We're barely using them, but we're not getting as many emails anymore about busing anymore.
We don't, yeah, but see, we're not getting, but we don't also know what, that's where it comes to data. What are our administrators hearing? What is their biggest plights every day? What are the staff? In that respect, we don't have that, right? That's what the survey is supposed to get us. So it is a tight, listen, we're all in the same boat. We have a little more information because our brains have more information from previous. So we all have our own. I don't even want to say how many. We have more information in some capacity, but we don't really have any more information than you. And as far as the objective goes, we identified the objectives last year. We have a lot of people that are struggling in their managing their family life right now. We can't just dismiss them. We have never once talked about how we were gonna make it better for half of our neighbors. Listen, my life, I live right down here, right? And I said this before. My life is way easier than people that live up, that have high school students that live up in Cortland Manor, because I'm not driving back and forth 5 times a day, 6 times a day. We have to admit that. And in order for us to fix a problem, we have to admit we have a problem. And again, we have kind of done that. We've gotten there. We've done that work.
But you just said we don't know the problems yet because we
We
don't
have
have
the
the
problem. We know the
surveys.
problem. I didn't come here prepared to share the problems. I can give you a list of about 60 of them.
I think.
I mean, that's not the point. We
Yeah.
did this work last year.
Yeah, I wouldn't say we have like this running list, but we all, I mean, I know you guys sat through the same town halls and community, you guys came to the board meetings every religiously last year. So you heard the same concerns that we heard, like, that's the data, that is the data,
Can't
like,
dismiss them.
it's the family's hardships, and I don't have. My kids are not in elementary school anymore. I also don't want to survey people. That's my job as a board member. If I want to go out and talk to all these constituents and find out what's best, how they feel, I'm gonna go do that. Like, you're doing that anyways, like. you're
Okay,
talking to
you know what, I disagree with that because we still have up on the survey, we have the COVID survey, re-entering to school. And how people felt about masking and how they felt about 6 feet apart. That survey result and that data is still on the website right now. But not the October 2020 Princeton Plan survey. Why you can survey about COVID and if I wear a mask or don't wear a mask, if I can be 6 feet apart or not be 6 feet apart, but you can't ask me what my preference is. That's now my board job. How are you going to get a real pulse of what the entire community wants? You know what you're getting a pulse of? You're getting a pulse of the people that you interact with. And we all, I don't have elementary kids. Okay? I'm older. I interact with older people. So you know what you get from me? You know what you get? You get the senior citizen, the tax part of it, the people who are scared to be taxed out of their homes. We all bring something differently, but I would no way say that I could tell you what elementary school parents are feeling because I don't live it.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Could any of you tell me if there's a piece of information that if you could magically have it, would potentially change where you are on this issue right now?
Yes,
What is it?
I would like to know the community's preference.
And if you had some magic way of knowing that there was.
I didn't
what,
say
like,
that,
but operationalize that for me, like a majority of the community, consensus across the community, like what? What does that mean?
I still do take into account that we are a board and we have to do what's best for the community and what's best for the kids. And what's best for student learning and outcomes, okay? I take that very seriously. But to be up here and say, I'm hearing this and I'm hearing this, you're hearing it from who you hang out with or who you socialize with.
Sure.
I would like to know what the community wants, because I think it would make it much more
But I'm gonna
palatable,
push you a little bit.
but it would make it
The
palatable.
reality is that you are going to hear a diversity of opinions from. the
And we
community.
have, yes, we have.
Okay, so, but you have that, so tell me again, what could be offered to you right now that would potentially change where you are? Right, because it sounds like we know that the community, it feels like I've been.
You know, you've been.
10 minutes, and I know that there are a diverse set of beliefs about what should happen, right?
This is,
So that's not new information that we
Yeah,
can give you.
you're right.
Okay, so that's not the answer then.
So for me, I don't even know if it's a matter of obtaining new information. So I think everyone knows my position is fairly square. I'm a community school person. That's my preference. So much so that I pulled my kids out of public school. They never go to private school. So they're in the same building and they'll be there until I decide that they're either going to go to another school, right? It's a K-8 building. I like the idea of it. There's a lot of benefits that we find with interacting with different grades. My daughter acts as a mentor to kindergartners. My son's being mentored by an 8th grader. That's lost in the model, right? I went to school here. I liked the community feel. I liked what was created from a community connection, and that's what I came back for. With that said, I also heard a lot of different perspectives and opinions. So for me, it's boiled down to a pretty simple piece. Not everyone has the right to buy their preference. And in the current housing market, not everyone has the ability to move, because trading a house from house A and your house in community A to community B, same priced house, you're likely gonna, unless you own it and you're trading cash, you're gonna have a much higher cost of living as a result of the new interest rates. So when I synthesize all of the opinions and all of the data, my takeaway is sort of fewer transitions are better for kids. How do we give them the supports to help them? And maybe a community school model that I love and is right for my family isn't necessarily right, but I haven't heard anyone tell me that more transitions is better. So I feel like, and again, it's not a vote, but I haven't yet heard anything that says that my vote last year for Plan B is the wrong vote for our community, because it does sort of harmonize all of the things that everyone loved and hated about where we are and where we were. And if we're really interested in finding a path forward as a community, then I think, and I said this last year, everyone has to be a little bit disappointed. If otherwise, we're going to walk away with chest pounding and teams A versus B winning. And I don't mean plans, I mean teams. And that's never going to allow for cohesion. So for me, finding a plan that brings kids together from different corners of the community sooner is something that people seem to want. And minimizing transitions and increasing time in a building to have a sense of community. My big fear is in this model, what likely happens is kids are going to socialize outside of school, and you're only going to end up in a vacuum with your friends because you're a soccer player and you play soccer and those are your friends. And when you come to school, you're going to end up finding what's familiar, and you're going to find what's familiar with the people you've connected with, where in a smaller setting with fewer kids, because they can't socialize at 150 kids, they're going to have the ability to probably maybe foster friendships across a different variety of interests. And I think that's where true friendship and community comes from. Otherwise, it creates the jocks and the gamer kids and the kids who like role-playing games and all of those things. So for me, what I'm hearing over and over again, you wrote it in here, transitions aren't wonderful for kids, but there's clearly some benefits to coming together. For my family, pulling them was the right move, but maybe for the community, what's right is the path that we were on, which is coming together sort of in a hybrid fashion before we do it in a secondary, in a like pre-secondary fashion. I'm hearing everything I need to hear to make a decision based on the presentations thus far, the community's conversations, the board table conversation. And now I get to make a decision without any personal impact whatsoever. It's not about my kids anymore. And I still think that this wouldn't be the way that I would vote now.
So I have a question. One of the things you talked about are just the pros and the cons, right? We haven't even evaluated what the cons are for any of these plans that are being presented to us, or we're gonna vote on it, right?
You have to talk it through.
I understand that, but that's what I'm saying, the pros and the cons. We don't have all of that information to say, these are the cons with this plan, and this one is more beneficial, and let's evaluate what we're doing from one to the other. We have no information. We know what we have right now. We know where we're at right now. We know the kids are together for 2 solid years now in school, and whatever we decide to do, if we decide to change this plan, they are probably likely not gonna be together because the whole student's gonna go on.
Wait,
We also,
that's the other thing. When you say that, they're not going to be together. What is that? I guess that's what my struggle here, but they are going to be together. They're going to be together for a very long time. Because they're going to be together from 3rd grade through 12th grade. It's a very long time.
correct.
But we're eliminating a transition for our youngest learners to make sure that when they leave 2nd grade, they are all reading. Right now, I don't know if we have that. So if I would tell you what I would need to know what kids have to be together. So we have the best outcomes for students. And I mean, I do believe, and I believe from the very beginning that this is too many transitions. So,
And again, that's a part of the, what they are learning and how they are learning. We haven't addressed that yet. So if we haven't addressed that portion of it, how can we fix anything in the next model or any other model if we haven't even solved that issue before we move on to the next? So that's my concern. My concern is we're trying to fix something without understanding what the cons are for the other thing that we're gonna jump into, or what the ramifications are gonna be towards for kids in each of those classrooms. We don't even know what options they're gonna be, right? We also don't even know if they're gonna fit all the kids in the class, if there are gonna be enough sections. Like, these are all things that we need to figure out, but like
I
I
don't
said, in every scenario that we have, we are going to have cons to everything that gets presented. And until we do the work to actually understand what all the pros and cons are for each of those, we can't actually make an informed
you're-
decision on.
So you're.
How about, I don't
you're on a little
understand what
bit-
she means by what they are learning. What do you mean by, we know what they are learning? It's
We
mandated.
understand that, but we are working through curriculum changes of things we want to do, incorporating DE and I, like
We
there's.
changed 90% of our curriculum.
We
Walking
did,
into a plan last year, like we changed math, we changed the way that we changed math. It's a different program. We changed the words their way is new. We had a lot of new.
We have a lot of new,
We had
but
new
we have no, we have
It
no.
always keeps evolving and changing.
It does, but we don't have a data point of what we can point to for those new things that we rolled out as to how they're
For anything
working.
from before it.
So
So we don't have.
Well, the way I hear what you're saying is you don't have the luxury of putting on hold all the other decisions you've been talking about and making at this
Correct,
table.
yeah.
If this decision wasn't taking up space, you don't have that luxury.
Right.
And so there does need to be sort of parallel work happening while you're making this decision. These other things can't wait. That's what I'm hearing.
So we're not involved in in those day-to-day. We're not typically involved in those day-to-day curriculum decisions. We're not involved in the operational pieces. We're not involved in how the teachers are teaching.
But that doesn't change the fact that if you weren't talking about this, you wouldn't not be meeting. There'd be something you'd be talking about. Like there's business,
Yes,
to
there
be
is.
I'm sure, right? And if there's not, wow, that's impressive, right? Let me know how you got there.
Yeah.
But I bet there's other business. And so that's all I'm hearing is there's other business. We can't put that off. While this decision is, that doesn't mean you have to make the decision faster. It doesn't mean you should put I'm not suggesting either of those things. I'm just saying that's what I'm hearing is yes, there's other business that we should be attending to as
I'm
well.
not sure, yeah, Tamika, I'm not sure that the reality is that this decision would get any easier in a year or 5 years. Because there's always changes, there's always decisions that we're making, there's always changing curriculum, we're always looking at how we can help all of our students improve, get better.
The standards
The
change.
Standards change, I mean, this is why it's hard, like, this is why it's emotional, this is why it's hard, this is why we listened and waited. But it's here, and it's unfortunate, like, this is not easy for any of us, I don't think it's gonna be easier here, I don't think you're gonna have any more data that it's gonna make it easier for you in a year, I really don't.
But I guess my question is, what are we using as our baseline? Like, what's our point of reference that we're saying, this is what we had, right? Like what data point are we using to say, this is what we had, this is where kids were, and this is where we want to get to? And we've seen no change, so that's why we're doing this.
We're never getting, you mean as far as
So
developmentally?
we're just making a decision on how we think the schools should be.
It was 3 community schools that had this demographic, and we chose. Princeton plan was, not that I like it, was pitched as cost savings. I mean, does that what it means to me? No, I don't think that's what it means to you, but for many community members, that's what it meant to them. It was just cost savings.
Well, there was also no ability to discuss alternative arrangements at that time, because whenever it happened, the superintendent at the time simply responded with, we can't go any further and that doesn't save enough money. Never once was it what's best for kids, never once was it what's best for academics. Everything was a shoot down based on dollars and cents.
And it was COVID. You weren't allowed in when they were voting.
I mean,
You were
We
outside.
never had these conversations. The boards before us never had these conversations.
So I'm not asking necessarily for a year. I'm asking for right now, what are we looking for? What's the data points? And if you guys have more information, can I have it so that I can be equally as informed and know exactly what our goal is for the vote?
I'm gonna give Benita permission to my email account, so she can have that Princeton plan.
But we have.
Don't go through it now.
Oh.
don't want to.
Yeah,
Thank
thousands
you.
of emails.
Thank
yeah.
I didn't even remember that. I gotta be honest with you, because I just kept filing them and filing them. I have the October 2020 survey results with the actual feedback that I foiled.
We have the strategic plan results where we have
This-
like hundreds of.
And we also, Carmen, when we had that community forum, she synthesized the data. So there's that document that you could look
And
at.
then you synthesize data. too.
I synthesized, I can look through all my files. The one thing that I did want to say that I have not experienced Princeton Plan. My son was out of it. I've only experienced middle school so far. And what I've noticed is in the community schools, he was in such small classes with the same kids. I made connections with other parents. So I knew parents, like I really knew them. And now that he's in middle school, this is his second year in middle school, he's on a whole new team. I don't know any of these parents. It's just, it's a big disconnect. Because in the past, I would reach out to parents to say, hey, is so-and-so going through struggles, or do they feel like, you know, they don't belong or something, anything. I have no parent to reach out to who's my, you know, gauge of, is your kid going through the same thing? The parents I find myself reaching out to, he is not in class with. They are from preschool, when he was in daycare to preschool, and I was with those parents for 5 years, and they're from Frank G, and none of those kids are on his team. So it's not just the connections that students make. I mean, it's the connections that parents make. I mean, it really does take a village to raise a child. You know, it's those parents that call me and say, you know, I just saw your kid do a wheelie on his bike without a helmet. I don't know any of the parents that are on his team now. None.
But see, your experience is different than my experience,
Yeah,
because
you're
I've
right.
made a lot of amazing friends that are completely from other schools.
But-
My son's best friend he was from FGL. So I feel like, here's the thing, we just need to get all the information that we need, right? I want to also make sure that all future numbers are also implicated in whatever data we're gonna get back that shows students and occupations in the classrooms, and for all the options that we have, I need to make sure that that's included. Because one of the things I just want to make sure that we note is that Buchanan has this apartment complex that's gonna be coming here soon. 51
She sent
two-bedroom
it.
apartments.
She sent out how many? I think it was 13
I'm just
kids.
making sure that that's also included in whatever number for future
But it's also
progression.
5, 10 years from now.
Do you want to know what? You
But
asked
we're
what we
doing this
need.
for future schools, so we should be incorporating.
But we're not planning, the data that she's presenting is not for 5 years from now.
We need to understand how enrollment
But
can
we
be.
do.
Yeah, the enrollment data is part of it, but
Okay.
you asked what we need, and you made a really big statement. And the big statement you made is, there's really, I don't know if I'm paraphrasing it correctly, I could be ad-libbing. There's no real big savings in any model that you pick. And, you know, for the community, that's not what was pitched. When you said, we're making this big change, we need all these data points. The data point that the community used to make this switch was cost savings. And she is clearly saying that, you know, I need the dollar amount attached to each one, because I think the community
Yeah.
needs that as well.
Well, yeah,
They
and
do.
I don't think we can keep looking at what anyone else did, because we are, as was stated, 7 very different individuals.
No, I think we
From
need
there
the
to-
real
yeah.
dollar amount.
I don't think we need to say any more of like what anyone else did before or how it was, like, we need to focus on from today moving forward, right? Today and the future.
Well, we have to make
So-
sure we don't do the same thing. We have to talk about children.
Yeah, no,
That's-
exactly,
that's-
absolutely.
yeah, that- what-
But I think that's what we are doing.
We are, yes.
Yeah.
I'll give you everything I have.
Thank
I will not lose.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're also pretty funny. I enjoed it.
Thank you.
I learned, but I enjoyed your presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, very good.
hope. I'm with you. I truly hope, you find your way through this and to a point, like you said, where the community can come back together. And I'd love to be a part of any part of that that makes sense for you all going forward.
Thank you.
We'll be here every other week.
You're funny too.
I'm done. That's all I got. Unless I'm sitting next to Lisa.
No, you stay on your side.
She's an antagonist over there.
She behaves
I
so
saw,
well.
you were
She
doing it
behaves
earlier.
so
I saw,
well.
it's on film, you and Amelia. You're just, I saw it joking. I saw it.
When I put my
It's-
teeth.
There's one common theme. Wasn't you, Amelia?
She was talking about the squirrels, what she wanted to do.
Can I ask you one more question, actually? So positive, tolerable, and toxic stresses. So how do you, what do those look like? Can you like, I would just like to.
Yeah, oh,
Sure,
it's
parents.
actually a fun game to play,
Because I
right?
also, I would think that they change based on your experiences also. So I just wanna. I just wanna know what that looks like. How can we prepare our kids for that at any level? What kind of sports and. If you could.
It's kind of a trick game that I play where I ask folks, well, tell me what you think would be positive stress, what would be tolerable, what would be toxic? Because the reality is there are very few, some, but few events that can very neatly be placed in any one of these bubbles. Because it's not about the event, it's about your reaction to it and the human's resources that they bring. So the same event could be considered a tolerable stress to one child and toxic to another because they're the little guy with the, where you go, this guy with a whole bunch of stuff. That little bump in the road might be nothing to someone with an extraordinary set of resources. But it could be quite challenging to someone who's already carrying a whole bunch of trauma, right? And so it's not about the event, and you might answer differently to what you would put in a tolerable stress versus a toxic stress than the person next to you. Is that?
Yeah. I just think it's important when we think about that as, because in any decision we make, there's gonna be stress. And our kids are gonna go through transitions. And I would like to think that something that is tolerable is not always bad, or is toxic could become tolerable. I'm thinking our kids grow and change as we have. And I sometimes think like something that's tolerable, or I may have perceived as tolerable, when I look back on it, was actually positive.
Yeah.
And I just want to make sure that like, we think about that too, when we say that as our kids transition, it's difficult, but you know, we create support that maybe it's tolerable and it actually ends up positive.
Yeah, that's where the frame of it's like kind of depressing, but every choice you make is going to have some pros and some cons, right? And you know, there were so many moments where I could have jumped in and said, I hear you that that's a good thing that you like about that. Let me make sure you see that on the other side, there's these other pros and cons to that, like I spent a lot of time today telling you that transitions are dangerous. But we also don't want children who go through their entire schooling, never having a transition, and never knowing how to navigate a transition, because they will be shocked when they go off to college, right? So that becomes a tolerable stress, right? But at what point do we have so many transitions happening for children who already struggle with stability and consistency that it becomes toxic, right? So that's one of those like,
Fine lines.
well, and just like, well, if you choose to go this route, these are the hardships you're going to face. And if you choose to go this route, there are a different set of hardships. And some kids will flourish in this one, and some kids will flourish in this one, right? It's just, what's important, I think, and I hope I've like bored you with this, and you're like, stop saying it already, is that you're just very clear visioned about what the downsides are of what you go forward and do, because there will be some things will go wrong, right? Like if you had asked me after you made this decision, what's the first thing that's going to be a problem? I would have said the buses, the buses are going to be a problem. Now, is that a reason to throw the whole thing out? I don't know. That's up to you. Like, how big is that a tolerable stress for you all, or is that a toxic stress? But I definitely would have predicted that the buses the first year, I'm in a district that hasn't changed their bus routes in like 40 years, and they still don't show up the first week of school. You know, like busing is really hard. So, but if you know that that's the problem, when it happens, one, you might have a plan in place, like, here's who you call, here's who you tell, here's what we can do for you, here's what the bus is gonna get, right? And second, it kind of takes away the, you know, I knew this wasn't gonna work, right? Because I can say, I knew it wasn't gonna work in that variable either. I knew that that was going to be a problem. But we planned for it, but we're prepared. But that is something that we are interested in tolerating and working through in order to get the other benefits that come from this choice. Now, that's just one example, and I can give you some on the other side too. So again, like, don't take that to mean like I'm in favor of one thing or another. But the more we can be conscious of what the hard things are about each of our choices, and then plan for them and put some supports in place, the better off you're going to be. But if we go forward thinking that there's some magic plan that there aren't going to be downsides to, I think you're going to just keep flip-flopping, right? Because then something bad is going to happen. You say, oh, well, that other thing might have been better. And you're starting to, you know, move the deck chairs when more important work needs to happen.
Thank you.
Are there support things we can put in place to ease the transitions to make those?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. Of course, yes. And you know, that would be another like really good engagement, right? Of thinking about, well, what kinds of sports, and some of your educators thought of some good ideas today, right? And some are more expensive than others, and some are harder to get done than others. But there are schools all over the country who, you know, have kids who in 3rd grade move to a different school in 4th grade, have kids who in 6th grade move to a different school in 7th grade, and some do nothing and fingers crossed and hope it's going to be okay. And some kids are and some kids aren't, and some kids do a whole bunch of things to ensure that a bridge is built, right? And then so that crossing happens in a conscious, safe, and stable way for kids. But that's one of those places where you know, coming back to, is there a cheaper or less cheap? I don't think anyone sold you a bill of goods. I suspect that there was some number crunching that happened. I don't know, but I'm guessing. That said, well, if we do this thing, you know, we can consolidate this and we need fewer of this and we need less of that. But what maybe wasn't done was, but then we're going to need more of X.
Yes, yeah.
Right,
That's it.
right.
Well,
And that's what's important. Is if we make this choice, we're gonna save here. And that's what I mean by, I don't think there's like a magic, you know, most economic option, right? If you save here, you probably need to invest over here.
I think it was done behind closed doors and it wasn't shared with the community. So those conversations definitely happened.
the busing pieces and things like that?
That study that was on the study.
Transportation.
The transportation study that wasn't shared, and then the whole study, the building utilization.
Yeah.
For all of the buildings.
Building utilization was up.
You know what? It wasn't gone over, like
Oh,
she's
yeah.
going over the presentation. It wasn't talked about at the board table so people knew that it was up.
You know what comes to mind for me is this is really hard, obviously, and you're all very passionate, thoughtful people, right? But if I can be a little bit brave, I'm gonna say this. I actually think you're in a really interesting position to get creative about what you want to see that meets a lot of your differing needs. But it might take 10 years, right? And so I don't know, like maybe there's a way that you can let yourselves think about, you know, not be constrained by, well, which buildings do we have and how many kids fit in these buildings, and you know, the buses are hard and nobody wants to travel 10 minutes, right? Those are all true and they're variables to consider, but if we really thought about what we wanted for this district in 10 years, what would that be? Like, that's kind of a cool position to be in, to think like, well, what's happening right now, maybe is working for some, maybe it's not working for others. But if we're willing to shake things up, then man, let's at least shake them up in a way that's really gonna work, not just in a way that makes half of our community happy. I don't.
I like that.
I like that too.
We should keep that in mind. We don't have to do it all for next year or today, right? It can be a plan.
I like that, let's do something that it doesn't just work for half of the community, that works for everybody. It can't just be. It's gotta work for everybody. Like I said, the community needs to come back to be together. It really does.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Well, we've got a lot more business to do. What'd you do, Lisa?
I don't know.
This is my second.
I will say your lines this morning were much more understanding. Meeting lines, yeah.
Oh, I don't know, can we go to the superintendent's report?
Mike had something he wanted to share with everybody here. Hard word. We continue on them.
Did you want to?
No,
Oh, okay.
I told you that, come on up.
Just a recognition of the hard work that was on display here.
Or we need a mic. There's a mic. Grab a mic.
Thank you. I'll stand. Grab a mic. So I think tonight was an example of some of the hard work that it takes to be on the board and to put kids at the heart of all decisions. And as someone who is a semi-outsider, hoping to become part of the community, and I mentioned this to the PTA last night, seeing how this conversation has evolved is a testament to the hard work and the focus on the concern for all kids at the heart of your decisions. It's very evident. It's gone from what buildings we should use. And tonight, I think you drilled down on a lot of things. But the conversation has been evolving to what do we want our student experience to be over their 12 years, 13 years here. And that's a testament to the hard work. And to that end, it's with great pleasure and gratitude that we come together to recognize and celebrate the dedication and hard work of our school board members during this New York State School Board's Recognition Week, which takes place October 16th to October 20th, 2023. This week, we pay tribute to the individuals who selflessly volunteer their time and effort to serve our community and our students. Annually, the governor and the State of New York School Boards Association acknowledge these invaluable contributions of school board throughout New York State. It is a time to dedicate our expressing a deep appreciation for those who step into these leadership roles within our school districts, driven by a commitment for the welfare and education of our students and their children and the children. In recognition of your unwavering dedication, Governor Hochul has officially declared this week New York State School Board Recognition Week as an acknowledgement of the pivotal role that you as school board members play in shaping the future of education and ensuring the highest levels of student achievement. We would like to take time at this moment to honor and express our appreciation to members of the Hendrick Hudson School Board. And I know you all know each other, but I want to officially read it into the record. Alexis Bernard, President. Erica Mills, Vice President. Jennifer Baker, Jeremy Basso, Tamika Dietrich, Stephanie Hickey, and Amelia Silverman. These individuals have invested countless hours and unceasing effort in improving our school system and making certain that every Hendrick Hudson student receives the highest quality education possible. And during this week of recognition, it's important to highlight the core responsibilities for our school board members that they have. They craft a shared vision for the future of education, set the course for the school district to achieve the highest levels of student performance, ensure accountability for student achievement outcomes, develop and present a budget to the community, align district resources to enhance academic achievement, foster a healthy school district culture for both learning and work, and undertake many other essential tasks that are crucial for the success of our educational system. And we invite each member of our community, not only within the Hendrick Hudson School District, but throughout the state of New York, to join us in thanking you, our devoted school board members, for your tireless efforts and commitment to governing our schools. Your dedication makes a significant impact on the lives of our children and the future of our community. So thank you for your unwavering support, and we ask that everybody please join us in celebrating this board and New York State School Board recognition.
Thank you.
Thank you. And it's signed sincerely, Dr. Dennis R. Laurel Jr., interim superintendent, Dr. Margaret Ruler, acting superintendent, and myself, newly appointed soon as superintendent. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're in spirit.
Thank
Dennis said today that he might be around on Friday.
I actually talked about that. Did you? Yeah, he's like, they're gonna clear me Thursday night and I'm gonna stop by on Friday. I'm thinking, that sounded good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for all you do.
When's Carmen Day?
Every day. We've got a Carmen day.
We need like a whole week.
That's true.
Every day. Every day we have Facebook. It's awesome. Thank you. Thank you. She's the mom of the All right. Thank you. That was.
Yeah.
Are we moving right on to our policy readings? Is there anything else? Superintendent report, do we have anything that needs to share tonight? Okay. All right, policy readings. So Erica, we are doing the first reading of policy 1230, public participation at board meetings.
So before I read it, I'm just gonna give some background. We had this policy. This is a revision to the policy. Our original policy was 5 lines. So this is a little bit more robust and more explanatory, and this is the NISBA wording. So just but vetted. So that's just where you know where the I'm gonna try I think every time I present the policy, I'm gonna try to give you the origination of it, because you're gonna hear more and more, because we're doing this policy audit with NISBA, that our original wording that we're starting with is that wording. So just keep that in mind as you're reading them. Okay, I'm gonna start reading. Public participation at board meetings, policy 1230. The Board of Education encourages public participation on school-related matters at board meetings as outlined in this policy. To allow for public participation, a period not to exceed 15 minutes shall be set aside during the first part of each board meeting for non-agenda items pertaining to the district. A second 15-minute time period will be set aside after board discussion of agenda items. These periods may be extended by a motion and a majority vote of the board. The district, by allowing a limited public forum for speaking at its meetings, neither screens nor restricts the content of speech, nor does it indemnify the speaker against legal liability. The board will not permit discussion in public session involving individual district personnel or students, and caution speakers about defamatory comments that may subject them to a lawsuit. The board recommends that persons wishing to discuss matters involving individual district personnel or students should present their comments on and/or concerns to the superintendent during regular business hours. All speakers are to conduct themselves in a civil manner. Obscene language, libelous statements, threats of violence, statements advocating racial, religious, or other forms of prejudice will not be tolerated. Persons making presentations at a board meeting will address remarks to the president and may direct questions or comments to board members or other district officials only upon the approval of the president. Board members and the superintendent shall have the privilege of asking questions of any person who addresses the board. Questions and comments from the public concerning matters that are not on the agenda will take under consideration and refer to the superintendent for appropriate action. And this is reference to civility policy 1525.
So that's it. 1 second.
Like,
Yeah.
what you say?
Yeah, but does that say, so if somebody comes, I've read this a couple times and I'm just hearing it different with you reading it. If somebody comes to the board meeting and they speak, Jeremy can ask them a question.
You,
Bring the book. It says you can ask.
upon approval by the president.
Yeah, you have to.
No.
Yes.
Board members and the superintendent shall have the privilege of asking questions of any person who addresses the board. The other part is
Oh,
about,
the second board, yes.
I like it.
we were never allowed to do that.
Well, we're changing our policy.
Can I,
So should we add the 3 minutes to this and then that wraps everything up? Like each person's only allowed to speak for 3 minutes, so like we take that. Question, like, remember how you had to read that whole spiel, which is
Right.
most of it,
Which I don't think I really ever did.
but should we put in there, each speaker is allotted
I don't know
3
if you
minutes?
want.
we had it, and I don't think the NISBA one didn't, so we took it out.
The NISBA one does not say for 3 minutes,
Yeah.
it says 15 minutes.
15 minutes. But
Right.
can I know we talked about with the piece here that we were currently doing agenda, non-agenda before. And this is going to change that, but can I clarify if I'm correct that we said that would be before we do any
So
votes?
we're gonna have we're gonna keep non-agenda items first,
Yes,
so that those people can come speak and go. We're gonna put the agenda items after
discussion.
discussion,
For-
yes, so you're
Yes,
clarifying this.
I just wanted to make sure that the community is aware. No, it is, but so when we were meeting, we talked about doing almost like a hybrid to how it used to be. Before, it used to be non-agenda, agenda. We said people had to sit through that whole thing, and sometimes by the time they got to speak, it was after a vote had already taken place.
We want to avoid that.
So their statements were then kind of null and void, right? Something already happened. So we said when we were creating this one, that even though it's gonna be two separate, that we will have a discussion, but we will listen to comments before we make a vote.
Right, because that will eliminate, if our discussion eliminates someone's need to speak, then we don't have to listen to something that would have been clarified or waste their time or anyone else's.
Yeah, but the
But
way,
it'll also allow them to have input
Before
prior
we
to
make-
us voting, so that we're making the most informed decision we can make in our.
So I just want to make sure that, yeah, we're clarifying
I
that for
like
anyone
the-
reading this.
like, I totally agree. That's why I like the comments, because like, yes, they can learn by sitting here, but typically people come, they want to speak, they want to get out their piece, and then they want to find out what their answer is, right? I feel like the policy, while I love this, and I have no qualms about it, I feel like it's so specific. Like what we as a board decided that we wanted to move all comments up to the beginning. That's what we did, right? Like, this is saying that you can't do that.
We have to make we can make a motion by a majority of the board.
To
So
extend.
we can extend, but in anything else, we could always make a motion.
To violate our policy?
Well, we can also.
To restructure the meeting.
We
Well,
can.
why don't you just call it a second 15-minute period set aside?
What was that? My,
Sure thing.
I need to know because I gotta write on it. I'll get that. I was actually trying to open the original comment, and I don't, for some reason, I don't see it.
I just think it's very specific.
Why don't you just say a second 15-minute period set aside for discussion of board agenda items, not say when it's gonna be. Like, there's two 15-minute periods and you're just not telling them here where it is. You're just saying
No, it does. It says a second 15-minute time period will be set aside after the
after
board
board
discussion
session.
of agenda items.
So why don't you just not say after? Or just like not determine when it's gonna be. That way, if you want
Yeah.
to move it, you can move it.
I see, we can structure it this way, but by removing this, the specification and the language, it allows you to alter the meeting without violating the policy.
So I think we talked about that while we were meeting. But if, again, people might want that structure, that routine where they know where it's going to be, and then if we see fit, we move it. Do you think? The question would be, would the community be okay with just having two time periods for talking and not knowing when that time period is going to be? Or do you, because I think we talked about that, we did talk about that when we were meeting. Because that was something that I think I actually mentioned, and Erica and I had that conversation with Jeremy, that we were talking about the routine. And that's why we put it after, and then we talked about, well, if we put it after, then they sat there, we voted and their conversation, that's why we talked about those pieces.
Does it, oh, go ahead.
Can we make it so, you know how we have a presentation? And then there's like 10 presentations and all the public comments at the end, but I really want to make a comment on the first presentation when the slides are up. Can we make that 15 minutes? Like, well, here's the first presentation. Does anyone have any comments about this first presentation?
The problem
Like
is
at the
that's
end.
gonna introduce a tremendous amount of, like,
Comments.
comment. You're gonna now have to give 15
15
minutes to
minutes
every
each section.
presentation. Otherwise, the person who waits for presentation 5 to talk may not have an opportunity, even though they were the first on the list, because we burned them up on the first 4.
And that always aggravated me that I
I
had a
know.
question and
Maybe
it
we
was
could
2
just-
hours before and I don't have the slides in front of me to.
Bring them back.
But don't,
So I just have one question that goes along with the conversation to what you raised and what supports the conversation that we had when we were trying to structure this. Do we just add a sentence that says the board can rearrange the order of the meetings if it supports that night's agenda with a majority vote? Now it keeps structure in place, and if something comes up that would require us to need to.
I would
make a-
say in the agenda setting process. I wouldn't even, you know, like moving the public comment section shouldn't, should be easy to just do.
Yeah,
that.
so maybe just adding that language here that
Mhm.
says that this is the outline, but if we need to amend it, we can do so at the board table
Yeah.
with a majority.
Make a motion to.
Yeah, exactly. So that language gives us flexibility while creating structure in a document, right?
So these periods may be extended or changed.
Yeah.
Or their order,
Or,
right?
or moved
Right.
within.
The board can amend the order of agenda items with a motion and a majority vote of the board.
Okay.
Or choose to extend.
But are we moving agenda items?
But we
Well, I
shouldn't say,
guess
it is-
Comment
it
or
is
agenda
agenda.
items. Okay, perfect.
should we say or though, because then that may mean one or that is a choice. We might want to do, what if we want to do
And
both?
or.
And or,
Here.
right, we might want to do
And
both,
or
Yeah.
choose to extend
because we're crazy.
the comments.
Anyone stay longer.
Yeah, we just wanna hang out.
Okay, yeah, we just like, we should like to hang out. Do we want to add in here that speakers get 3 minutes? That was what we didn't really
We
talk.
had, we talked about it. We had it on there. And then we deviated away and we went more towards NISBA, but we did talk about that.
I think you should, I'm not for silencing people, but I really do think you should put 3 minutes and then
Mhm.
put the language in there that you can extend it if need be.
I think keep it at 3
Yeah, because some
minutes.
people could go on and on and on, but then some people might need longer.
He's listening. This is listening. He said that it's procedural and it can vary as the BOE sees fit. For right now, you are using 3 minutes on this.
why can't we just? What?
So we don't have to, we could just say we're gonna make it 3 minutes and then we'll.
I
move
just
I
don't-
think
you have
your
to-
total time is all you need.
Yeah, that's.
Okay.
Because you could say, well, okay, we're gonna let
I
you
got
talk
it.
for 5 minutes tonight.
I
and that means
understand.
it's 3 speakers.
It's procedural and it is written in our, that is written in our.
And then also, I guess, at the same time, the person wouldn't be subject, how does the 15 minutes work? So if we're engaging in conversation, I decide to ask the speaker a question. Does that,
No, they get 3 minutes.
now, that also pauses the 15 minutes?
Yeah, then we're.
Because that
no,
can,
now you're
so now we're gonna have
We're
to
gonna
do.
make a motion and that's written.
So
in our
that's something to
procedure.
be mindful
It's
of.
also
when we
written,
just-
that is written in our procedure.
Okay,
We may have to add, we may have to adjust our procedure,
yeah,
but we'll get, we have a retreat on Monday as well.
oh, awesome.
I have a list of things to talk about in the retreat.
We're gonna need another day.
I think we did on occasion ask questions of the speaker, but it was relevant to the topic. Can you explain that? So I make sure I understand. I think it was more like that, not really to engage in a conversation, but more to understand. But it was really the
Okay,
president.
no. So we're good on first policy
Yeah, we'll
revisit?
bring it back.
Yeah.
There was no other concern, right?
Oh, wasn't there something that we talked
Took
about?
care of it.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yes, I read it. It's not-
It was a typo.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
We left off like a word.
It was a typo. Yeah. Okay. Next,
okay, new business. Fair decision making plan?
yep. Hold on a second.
Do you want to read, like, what do you want to read to?
I definitely don't want to read this entire thing because it's 4 pages.
Okay.
So do you want to get through the purpose?
Yeah, I think we should explain where this all came from, so it's all kind of wrapped together. So we have our strategic plan, we have our 4 pillars. And one of the pillars happens to be shared decision making. So in that, we have our targeted items to get the result, to get shared decision making in our district, right? So the shared decision making policy that we approved a couple of months ago was a result of that work. It's also a void because we should have had one for years. So now we have that. And in that policy that we approved, it is outlined that the district strategic planning, this is the shared decision-making planning team for the district, which is about 15 to 20 more of people that are in leadership roles or parents that volunteered, and staff that wrote this plan. And it is a plan outlining how our site-based teams will work and how they will make decisions. So I think I'm going to read what's important for me to read here. And I also want to preface this with this. Going forward, this will be approved in our July meeting every year annually. And so there will be a time where that district team meets and has a conversation about anything that may want to change, didn't work better. They'll be the group to make that decision. The board will be out of that at that point. Like, we won't, this should, after we get this initial piece done, this should kind of run on its own.
So voting tonight gets this?
We need to put it into practice, like as a board, because it is something that we really developed from our policy. We don't have to vote on it.
Yeah, but how about,
You don't even have to read it.
how about putting this stuff that I said?
I'm gonna do all,
Okay. Okay, I was,
do you want me to explain, you want me to read the introduction and the purpose first? And then we'll talk about that?
okay.
Okay. So, the Commissioners Regulations 100.11 require that each public school district board of education and each board of cooperative educational services, BOCES, shall develop and adopt a district plan for the participation by teachers and parents with administrators and school board members in school-based planning and shared decision-making. Such district plan shall be developed in collaboration with the committee composed of the superintendent of schools, administrators selected by the district administrative bargaining organizations, teachers selected by the teachers collective bargaining organization, and parents not employed by the district or collective bargaining organization. Provided that those portions of the district plan that provide for participation of teachers or administrators in school-based planning and shared decision-making may be developed through collective negotiation between the Board of Education or BOCES and local collective bargaining organizations. So this is the legalese of all of this and why we're doing it and who's on the committee. So that's the planning. That is the district team. That's to make up the district team that wrote the plan. Now, the purpose of the shared decision-making plan is below that, but I think it's important to point out what the site-based teams do. And we have that here. Hold on. Objectives, plan for participation in school-based planning. So I'm on page 2 now, where it talks about section A, educational issues subject to cooperative planning. And it outlines exactly what the purpose of that site-based team is. Then it outlines who's on the site-based team and why, how long they serve, the training that they will receive and what they're going to be considering when they're making, these decisions, what items they'll have to review, how many times they're going to meet, what consensus looks like, and then involvement. Then we get to the means to evaluate student achievement, because this entire plan is around student achievement and their education. Then it talks about responsibility and accountability. And this is where we talked in that group. Tamika was there with me about, I brought this up. I brought up our comments about making sure that we're hearing from more of the community. We're making these decisions, so it's not just a couple of people on a committee. And the group felt that really felt like this wording here protected you, that they have to go out and gather more information. So, but they didn't want to get as specific as how to do it. Because that's not really the purpose of this plan. The purpose of this plan is for the site-based team and the principal. The principal is the facilitator of the team the principal is gonna be in charge of getting and collecting all the data, making sure that the team has what it needs to make these decisions. So if it's something big, let's go back, sorry, Margaret, 6-day schedule. Okay? Oh. Okay, that would have been a site-based team conversation, right? And then the site-based team would have heard from, Margaret may have been involved in that. Or the principals would have facilitated a conversation and brought back a recommendation, but they wouldn't have made that in a vacuum. They would have went out to the community because it's a big decision, right? So they felt like this wording covered that. And again, this is, I think we need to get, we've never done this before. I think we need to see how it kind of goes. Let the principals get their hands on it and kind of put it into action. And then they can make adjustments of what does and doesn't work. And we are involved in that process. So this process here, we can be involved in. The site-based teams, we are involved in, and my recommendation is actually going to be to remove us from that.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that we should be a part of those conversations. I think it's important for us to be part of the plan, but not the actual internal conversations. I want to delete that from here. I just don't want to
The
do it.
BOE liaison?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That seems like the only piece that doesn't
That's-
really fit.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a teacher who's like untenured and they have a board member staring.
No,
at them
we
while
can't.
they're
It's not
expressing their,
appropriate.
yeah.
Not fair.
And we're not voting anyways.
No, we're not, we wouldn't be voting. So that line will.
If they want us to come and join a conversation, they
Absolutely.
always
They
can.
can invite us.
We don't want to influence any decisions, so we shouldn't even do that.
I agree.
So that's what, I mean, that's where we came. I know your concerns. We explained
I'm
your
just
concerns.
scared. I'm scared because it seems like how many parent volunteers do we have for shared decision making teams?
The shared decision-making planning team,
Yeah.
I think we have it's all the PTA presidents. So it's PTA presidents and parents. So there's 6 to 8 of them on this, that develop this parent.
No, but the teams that we made up for the committees.
After the fact?
After the
Oh,
fact.
there are 2 per grade level.
So altogether, we have how many parents?
13 times 2.
Okay, so of those 26 parents, did the same parent volunteer for different?
So the only time that actually was an issue with middle school, high school, I think at the elementary school, there's duplicates in the alternates, but not in the first. In the middle school, high school, there are duplicates.
I'm just scared that you'll have a particular group of people making decisions for others, and they don't represent the people they're making
Yeah,
decisions
but they're making
for.
educational
And
decisions.
Okay.
I'm gonna also say, I
Right.
think they're more so making recommendations.
Right.
Because it always comes back to the building principal and so like it follows that, like it.
I know. it- I
I'm
just-
one from my school and we make suggestions. We talk about the pros and cons to different things. We talk about how, what are the possible things that could go wrong if we do this? For example, we talked bell schedule and how we could change times a day. We were able to offer advice on the different options, but we didn't make the final selection. We just gave, here's what we could see happening as a good thing. Oh, this time starts too late. What if they have to go pick up someone from somewhere else? We offered suggestions. It ultimately came down to from there into the board. So it wasn't, they're not making changes. I mean, they can't make changes. They can offer recommendations and suggestions and
I think my concern
things
is it's
that are
the
going on.
same type of parent that can be involved. Because not everyone can be involved. So how do you get that parent that cannot be involved? And how do you get their feedback? So they're part of the shared
And that's,
decision
and
making.
that's, the group felt that line that said that we should suggest that they have to go out to gather information from other stakeholders. That's
Okay, I
That's
mean,
their
we need to
job.
see how it works.
It's the job, right? Yeah, I think it's gonna develop.
Yeah, I also think we haven't done this before, right? So we have to kind of get it going, see how it's going, and then try to make an evaluation from there as we go. I think that's. how
And
we're looking
hopefully,
at it.
right, like.
And
this
hopefully
is the
more
first year.
people want to do it.
People-
I mean, it comes like that with everything. It's always the same.
And it's during the school day.
It's
right?
always the same ones. This might be
No, it's
post
during-
after school. No, this is usually after These are after the day ends.
So like
After the
2
school
or
day,
3.
After the.
After the
school
school day.
I
After
just
the
asked
school day
Erica,
ends,
what,
yeah.
what is the process?
5 or 6.
This is the plan for the 23-24 school year. It is reviewed annually.
Mhm.
So if we need to make changes or improvements to the plan, it will.
Okay.
So we-
Absolutely.
And maybe they can offer a virtual option. I don't know if that's something, I guess that
Yeah.
will be,
Yeah.
the site itself can determine
Principal will be able to-
that
So they
aspect.
have
So if it's, like, if they can't physically be there, maybe they can still join in, like, that might be an option for parents.
Thank you, Erica.
She's like, oh, okay.
We probably should we officially vote on this, Carmen, you think?
Yes.
Well, you'll be voting on it every year.
It's going to be voted on every year and then renewed in July at the board meeting. in July.
Do we have to do?
Make a
first
motion to
reading,
approve
second
with
reading, or we
change.
just do it now?
I don't think we need I don't think we need a motion. I think we need to make a motion to approve it with the change, the one
Of
change.
no board liaison.
Okay.
Can we make a motion?
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve the Hendrick Hudson School District Shared Decision-Making Plan for the 23-24 school year with the change of removing a BOE liaison to each site-based team. Second. All in favor? Okay, the last order of business this evening, actually, first I should say, does anybody have any? If we're in, new business or committee report that needs to be shared out right now?
I don't think we have any committee report. I don't. All
I
I
mean,
mean,
when we do,
Falling
we'll
into
wait
your head,
till
sorry.
the first to share some findings.
What, you don't have one?
No, I was going like this to make Alexis be like.
No? Okay, you're good? Everyone's good? All right, so our last order of business is the resolution to consider level 3 grievance submitted to the board on September 13th. I would like to make a motion to deny the grievance.
second.
All in favor? So Carmen, that's 4 votes in favor to deny the grievance, and we have 3 who are abstaining as they were not present at the grievance hearing. Right. Okay, can I have a motion to close the meeting?
Motion to close.
Motion, have a second, all in favor?